Welcome. Settle yourself into stillness and allow the present moment to soften around you. Tonight, we are beginning a long journey through the world of the 16th century, the age of merchants, monarchs, and explorers. A time when being a millionaire was almost unimaginable. Yet a handful of people held fortunes so vast that they seemed to rival kingdoms themselves. But before we speak of those who controlled fleets of ships and mines of silver, let us pause. Let us take a slower step into the world of 1500, the world as it felt, as it sounded, as it smelled. For only by lingering in its atmosphere can we begin to understand what it truly meant to be wealthy, and what it meant to simply live in its shadow. It is the year 1500. The first light of morning creeps into a wealthy European city, perhaps Augsburg, in the lands of the Holy Roman Empire, perhaps Venice, where the canals glisten quietly, or Seville, where the warm air already carries the smell of oranges. Imagine yourself rising in a chamber of carved wood and stone. The bed is heavy, built of oak, with curtains drawn around it to keep the chill at bay. The mattress is stuffed with straw and feathers, uneven but warm. Above, beams run across the ceiling, darkened by years of smoke from candles and hearth fires. You open the curtains and step into the room. The floorboards creak faintly underfoot. A servant enters, carrying a copper basin filled with cold water. You splash it on your face, the shock of the chill making you blink awake. There is no glass mirror here, only polished metal that gives back a dim, blurred reflection of your face. Your clothing awaits: a linen shirt, rough but clean, woolen hose, and a long tunic of dark cloth, trimmed with modest embroidery. The fabrics are valuable, but they are heavy, coarse, and scratch slightly against the skin. Silk exists, of course, but only the richest of merchants or nobles can afford to wear it daily. To dress even in dyed wool is already a sign of prosperity. Step into the streets. The city is alive with sound. The clatter of hooves on cobblestones echoes between narrow alleys. Merchants call out from their stalls, offering bread, salted fish, bolts of cloth, and leather goods. Apprentices hurry past, carrying buckets of water or heavy bundles of firewood. The air is thick with smells: smoke from hearths, the sweetness of fresh bread, the acrid tang of tanners' vats, the faint sourness of refuse left in gutters. The houses lean toward one another, their timber frames painted in pale colors, upper stories jutting out above the streets. Windows are small, many covered with oiled parchment rather than glass. Behind them, the hum of daily life continues, the murmur of prayers, the clink of pots, the sharp cry of children at play. As you walk, you pass the great marketplace. Here, wealth is visible. Merchants from Italy display bright silks and spices carried across the Mediterranean, furs from the north, honey and wax from the countryside, silver coins struck with the marks of distant mints. You hear the metallic ring of a scale as a tradesman weighs coins carefully, rubbing each piece between his fingers to test its purity. But wealth is fragile too. Many live close to the edge. For every wealthy merchant, there are countless laborers, bakers, and cobblers whose days are long and hard. A loaf of bread takes hours of labor to earn. Winter is feared, for hunger comes easily when work is scarce and food prices rise. Imagine yourself lingering near a bakery. The air is warm, scented with yeast and smoke. Inside, a boy turns loaves from the oven, their crusts crackling as they cool. Across the street, a tanner stirs a vat of hides, the sharp odor stinging your nose. This is the texture of the city. a mix of comfort and hardship, luxury and struggle, bound tightly together. As the morning turns to midday, church bells toll across the rooftops. Their deep tones roll through the city, calling the faithful to prayer, marking the rhythm of the day. The sound mingles with the cries of vendors and the shuffle of feet, creating a constant hum that never quite ceases. Here, in this world of 1500, a millionaire does not live far above the crowd. Their counting houses and estates sit among these same narrow streets, their ledgers filled with the numbers that tie farmers, merchants, kings, and sailors together. They eat bread baked from the same ovens, though theirs may be flavored with spices. They walk the same cobbled alleys, though their cloaks may be lined with fur. To be wealthy in this world is to live not in isolation, but in a fragile balance. The smells of leather and smoke cling to your garments just as they do to anyone else. The sound of church bells fills your ears just as surely as it does the ears of a beggar. And beneath it all, there is the constant rhythm of labor, endless, necessary, shared. Inside a tall townhouse, you rise as a wealthy banker, one of Augsburg's most prominent citizens. The chamber is quiet, its thick wooden shutters still drawn. You push them open and cool air slips in, carrying with it the faint sound of hooves on cobblestones and the early chatter of the marketplace. Your bed is heavy and carved, its curtains drawn back to reveal linen sheets faintly scented with lavender. A servant brings in a basin of water, steam rising gently, the warmth a small luxury in a world where most wash in cold. You dip your hands, splash your face, and dry them on a coarse linen towel. Dressing is no simple matter. Layers of linen, hose, and a doublet of dark wool are pulled on carefully. Around your shoulders goes a heavy cloak, lined with fur against the chill. The fabrics are rich by the standards of the day, dyed deep colors that signal status, a dark green, a muted crimson. Such dyes are expensive, and to wear them daily marks you as a man of means. You descend to the counting house. The air smells faintly of ink and beeswax polish. The room is long, lined with shelves heavy with ledgers and locked chests. Sunlight filters through narrow windows, falling in shafts across the wooden floor. At a central table, your clerks are already at work, quills scratching across parchment, the soft rasp of feather tips mixing with the quiet coughs and murmurs of calculation. The first tasks of the day are letters. Couriers arrive, their boots dusty, carrying sealed packets from Venice, Antwerp, and Genoa. The wax is cracked, the parchment unrolled. Each letter tells a fragment of the world's commerce. A shipment of copper delayed by storms, a payment from a noble house now 2 weeks overdue, news of silver arriving in Seville. You run your fingers across the pages, the ink slightly raised, the words crisp. As your clerks copy figures into ledgers, you hear the steady rhythm of commerce itself. Numbers added, debts tallied, credits extended. Each line is a story, though few will ever read them. At midday, merchants begin to arrive. They bow respectfully, removing their hats, their voices carrying the accents of distant lands. One lays out samples of fine cloth from Flanders, deep blues and rich blacks, woven so tightly that the fabric almost shines. Another brings contracts for mining rights, his hands rough, his face lined from years underground. Each transaction is deliberate, paced slowly, tested with negotiation. Lunch is simple, but satisfying. Dark rye bread, dense and chewy, served with cheese and cured meats. A cup of spiced wine follows, warmed with cinnamon and cloves. The flavors are strong, almost medicinal, but comforting. As you eat, you listen to the muffled sounds of the city drifting in, the call of vendors, the lowing of oxen pulling carts, the laughter of children playing in the square. The afternoon is devoted to the mines. Silver and copper from the Tyrol form the backbone of your fortune. Reports arrive of output: how many cartloads extracted, how many smelted, how many sold. You picture the shafts deep underground, men with lamps strapped to their caps, hammers striking stone in steady rhythm. Though you never touch the ore yourself, your wealth flows from it, transformed by furnaces into coins that fill your chests. As daylight fades, you step briefly into the courtyard garden. The air smells of damp earth and herbs. A fountain trickles softly, its sound steady, soothing after the noise of figures and negotiations. You pause, breathe deeply, and let the rhythm of water wash away the day's calculations. Evening brings one final round of business. A noble arrives, cloaked in fur, seeking another loan. He speaks of obligations, of wars, of debts to be paid. His voice is urgent, his tone confident. But you know too well the risks of lending to princes. Still, the reward may outweigh the danger. You weigh his request, not only in coins, but in influence. When at last the candles burn low, you close the ledgers and lock the chests. The sound of the keys turning in the locks is firm, final, reassuring. The wealth of an empire rests within these walls. Numbers in ink, coins in chests, promises written on parchment. You retire upstairs. The shutters are closed again, the chamber quiet. As you lie beneath woolen blankets, you feel the weight of the day ease from your shoulders. To be a wealthy merchant banker in Augsburg is to live in constant calculation, surrounded by comfort, yet never free from worry. The city hums outside, steady, endless, and within, you drift into silence. As we linger in the world of 1500, it is worth pausing to consider what money itself truly meant. For us today, wealth is abstract, often invisible. Numbers flickering across screens, balances on bank accounts, digital transfers made in an instant. But in the 16th century, money was a thing you could hold, feel, weigh, and hear. Imagine sitting at the wooden table of a merchant's counting house. Before you rests a heavy chest, bound in iron. When the lock clicks open, the lid creaks, and inside, stacked neatly, lie silver coins. Each bears the mark of a ruler, a king's face pressed faintly into the metal, or a cross, or a crest. The coins are not identical. Some are worn smooth, their edges rubbed by countless hands. Others are newly minted, their ridges sharp, their images crisp. You scoop a handful into your palm. They're cold at first, then warm quickly against your skin. When you let them fall back into the chest, they cling together with a satisfying metallic ring, a sound that, in this age, carries the very essence of wealth. Yet coins were only one part of the system. Across the table, a ledger lies open. Thick parchment pages, each ruled with careful lines. Names are written in dark ink, their loops and strokes precise, the handwriting a kind of artistry. Beside each name are numbers, sums lent, sums owed, dates of repayment. This is how great fortunes were built. Money moved not only in chests of silver, but in agreements, in trust, in promises made and recorded. Merchants extended credit to one another, often without a coin changing hands. A shipment of wool or spices might be sold months before it even arrived. Its value inked into the pages long before it could be touched. To handle these ledgers required skill and patience. Each entry had to be balanced, each calculation correct. Imagine the sound of a quill scratching across parchment, the faint smell of ink made from oak coals and iron salts. The figures line up neatly, row upon row, a silent rhythm of commerce. But money was not always so orderly. Across Europe, dozens of currencies circulated at once. A coin minted in Venice might be accepted in Antwerp, but only after careful weighing to ensure its silver content. Gold ducats, silver florins, Spanish reals, German thalers. Each had its own value, its own reputation. Merchants carried small scales with them, weighing coins in taverns and marketplaces, testing them with a practiced eye. And then there was barter, still alive in many corners of the world. A farmer might pay rent, not in coins, but in sacks of grain. A craftsman might exchange leather goods for tools. Even among the wealthy, gifts of goods often replaced direct payment, a gesture of respect as much as of commerce. For the ordinary person, money was less about chests of treasure and more about survival. A single silver coin might buy enough bread for a family for days. To hold one was to feel security. To lack one was to know hunger. Imagine the feel of a few worn coins in your pocket, their edges smooth, their weight reassuring. Now imagine an empty pocket, the fabric light, the sound absent. That silence carried its own heaviness. In the halls of the wealthy, however, money took on different forms. Fine tapestries hung on walls, their threads dyed with expensive pigments. Cabinets gleamed with polished silver cups and goblets. Books, still rare and precious, sat bound in leather, their pages illuminated with gold leaf. Each object was both useful and symbolic, a visible sign of wealth transformed into permanence. As evening falls in the merchant's house, candles flicker against ledgers and coins alike. The light glints off polished metal, but it also warms the parchment pages, making the ink shimmer faintly. Wealth here is both tangible and intangible. The sound of coins, the lines of ink, the trust between men who never touch the goods they sell. Close your eyes and imagine the rhythm of it, the soft rustle of parchment turned, the faint clink of scales weighing silver, the steady scratching of a quill, the sigh of a merchant satisfied as the columns balance. This was the shape of money in 1500, solid, heavy, and yet fragile, counted in coins, recorded in ink, carried in memory. It was a system as human as the hands that held it, as fallible as the rulers who minted it, and as enduring as the stone walls that housed it. It is morning in Augsburg, one of the richest cities of the Holy Roman Empire. The sun has just begun to spill across the rooftops, catching the gilded tips of church spires and painting them in warm light. The streets stir slowly, merchants unlatching shutters, apprentices sweeping thresholds, the city beginning its rhythm. Close your eyes and listen. The 16th century breathes around you, steady, slow, and unhurried. As you settle deeper into the rhythm of the 16th century, let your thoughts drift across the ocean. In the year 1492, a Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus set sail westward under the flag of Castile. By the turn of the century, his voyages, and those that followed, had opened new routes, new lands, and most importantly, new streams of wealth. But to truly feel what this meant, imagine yourself in the bustling port of Seville around 1500. The Guadalquivir River gleams under the midday sun. Ships crowd the harbor, their tall masts creaking, their sails furled after long voyages. The air is alive with activity. Sailors shouting in many tongues, merchants tallying crates of goods, porters straining under the weight of barrels. You walk slowly along the wharf. The smell of tar and salt clings to the wood of the piers. Nearby, crates of exotic goods are being unloaded. Strange fruits, their skins bright and unfamiliar. Bundles of dyed cotton in colors you have never seen before. And most precious of all, the first trickles of gold and silver from the lands across the Atlantic. For the people of Europe, this was no mere curiosity. It was a financial shock unlike anything they had known. Gold coins had always been rare, precious things. Silver mines in Saxony or Tyrol had supplied Europe for centuries, but their output was modest, carefully rationed, slow. Now, whispers spread that entire mountains of silver lay waiting in the New World, richer than anything in Europe's history. Imagine how quickly those whispers stirred ambition. Merchants invested in voyages, kings granted charters, adventurers signed contracts with trembling hands. Ships were built, not only for discovery, but for profit. Every successful journey meant fortunes for financiers and crowns alike. Every failed expedition meant ruin. In the counting houses of Augsburg and Genoa, bankers watched carefully. They lent money to monarchs who promised repayment once ships returned heavy with treasure. They extended credit lines to merchants outfitting fleets, weighing the risks against the tantalizing rewards. Wealth, once tied firmly to land and traditional trade, was now entangled with the unpredictable waves of the Atlantic. Yet the shock waves were not only financial. They rippled through the imagination. In taverns and marketplaces, common people spoke of lands where gold was said to glitter in rivers where pearls could be gathered like shells. The stories were fantastical, exaggerated, and often false, but they stirred a sense of possibility and of envy. You stand in Seville's main square, watching as royal officials announce new decrees. Only licensed ships may trade with the New World, they declare. Every ingot, every ounce of gold, must pass through the Casa de Contratación, the royal trading house. The crown would take its share, always. For in this age, great fortunes were never entirely private. They were tied to kings, to empires, to the delicate balance of politics. Walk into a merchant's home, and you will see the change. A wealthy man's table, once set with pewter plates, now glimmers with silverware. His cloak is trimmed with fur from the Baltic and lined with silks brought overland through Venice. The spices on his food, pepper, cinnamon, cloves, are stronger, more plentiful, no longer reserved only for feast days. This is the visible ripple of the new wealth flowing in. But beneath the glitter, unease grows. Prices rise slowly, then more sharply. A loaf of bread that once cost a single coin now costs two. Farmers grumble. City folk mutter. Historians later will call it the price revolution, an inflation driven by the influx of silver and gold. Yet to the people living through it, it is simply confusion. Money seems less certain. Wealth feels more fragile. As evening falls over Seville, lanterns flicker along the wharves. The ships rest quietly now, their cargo secured. The river reflects the glow of torchlight, shimmering in long streaks. Somewhere, deep in the holds of a vessel, lies a chest of silver, bound for the royal treasury. It will fund wars, build palaces, and enrich merchants. It will also stoke debts, spread inflation, and reshape economies in ways no one yet understands. For now, you stand still, breathing the air of the harbor. Tar, salt, smoke, and the faint sweetness of spices mingle in the night breeze. The world has changed. The age of the millionaire has begun, fueled by oceans and empires. Imagine for a moment that your life's fortune rests not on land, nor on titles, nor on the inheritance of noble blood, but on calculation, on silver mined from mountains, on loans extended to kings, on ledgers filled with numbers that stretch across Europe. This was the life of Jakob Fugger, the man they called Der Reiche, the rich. Jakob was born in Augsburg in 1459 into a family of merchants already respected in their city. They dealt in cloth, in spices, in the steady hum of ordinary trade. Yet Jakob was not content to remain a modest merchant. From an early age, he showed a rare eye for opportunity and an even rarer tolerance for risk. Picture him as a young man walking the narrow streets of Augsburg with his cloak drawn tightly, listening, watching. He studied markets the way others studied scripture. Quietly, relentlessly, always searching for patterns. Where others saw uncertainty, Jakob saw possibility. His first step toward immense wealth came through marriage. In 1498, his family's firm secured a contract to supply cloth to the papal court in Rome. From there, their fortunes expanded. Jakob traveled himself to Italy, walking the marble streets of Venice and Florence, studying how bankers there used credit, exchange, and double-entry bookkeeping. He absorbed their methods, their habits, their careful precision, and brought them back north. But it was in the mountains that Jakob's true empire began. The Fugger family gained rights to copper and silver mines in Tyrol and Hungary. Imagine those mines, deep shafts, damp air, the steady ring of hammers striking stone, the flicker of torchlight in darkness. From this labor, from the swade of miners far underground, flowed streams of metal that would one day fill royal treasuries. Jakob organized it all: the extraction, the smelting, the transport, the sale. Silver, copper, even mercury. The Fuggers controlled more than Europe had ever seen in private hands. Jakob did not merely trade, he monopolized. He created contracts so vast that entire regions depended on his mines for their coinage. And then there were the loans. Kings came to Jacob as supplicants. Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor, relied heavily on Fugger funds to sustain his rule. In return, Jacob received privileges, rights to territories, and influence that extended far beyond Augsburg. Later, in 1519, when Maximilian's grandson, Charles V, sought the imperial throne, it was Fugger's money that secured the election. Vast bribes were paid to electors, bribes recorded in ledgers with cold precision. Without Jakob Fugger, there might have been no Emperor Charles V. Imagine the power of such influence. A man without noble title, without armies, could shape the destiny of Europe simply through credit. And yet Jakob remained cautious. He dressed plainly, spoke carefully, and rarely revealed more than necessary. Wealth for him was not display, but control. His fortune became legendary. Even in his own lifetime, people marveled at the scale. In an age when a skilled craftsman might earn 10 guilders in a year, Jakob Fugger commanded sums in the millions. He was, in every sense, the first man to embody the word millionaire. But with wealth came suspicion. Many whispered that money lending was sinful, that to profit from loans was unchristian. The church itself often condemned usury. Jakob defended himself by pointing to his piety and his charitable works. In Augsburg, he founded the Fuggerei, a housing settlement for the poor that still stands today. Small houses with simple gardens, rented for a token sum of 1 guilder per year, and daily prayers for the Fugger family. To this day, it remains the oldest social housing complex in the world. Picture Jacob in his later years, seated in a chamber lined with ledgers, his hands resting on the arms of a heavy chair. The air smells of parchment and wax, the light filtered through narrow windows. He reviews accounts with the same steady attention he had as a young man. His fortune is immense, yet his manner remains restrained. He is not a king nor a conqueror, but something altogether new, a man who rules not through armies, but through money. When Jacob Fugger died in 1525, his fortune was estimated at over 2 million guilders, an unimaginable sum, greater than many royal treasuries. His legacy shaped Europe for centuries. The mines he managed, the loans he extended, the systems he refined, all became part of the fabric of global finance. And yet, like all men, his life ended quietly. His body was laid to rest in Augsburg, beneath stone and silence. The ledgers closed, the chests sealed. But the rhythm of his fortune, the steady scratching of quills, the clink of coins, the hum of commerce, carried on, echoing through time. Jacob Fugger had shown the world what it meant to be a millionaire in the 1500s. Not glittering palaces, not endless feasts, but quiet control, patient calculation, and the steady pulse of money flowing like a hidden river beneath the surface of Europe. If Augsburg was the counting heart of bankers, then Antwerp was the beating pulse of trade. By the early 16th century, this Flemish city had become one of Europe's busiest marketplaces. Ships from every sea crowded its quays. Spices from the east, furs from the north, silks from Italy, silver from Spain, and cloth from England. All passed through Antwerp's hands. But what set it apart was not only its cargo, but its methods. Imagine walking into the Bourse of Antwerp, one of the world's first true stock exchanges. The building itself is grand but practical. High arcades supported by stone columns, a wide-open courtyard roofed with wooden beams, the air buzzing with the sound of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of voices. It smells faintly of parchment, wax and wool from the cloaks of merchants. The murmur is steady, like a hive of bees. Here, merchants from across Europe gather not only to buy and sell goods already in hand, but to make agreements for goods still at sea, or not even yet produced. A cargo of pepper from Lisbon can be bought and sold several times before the ship ever reaches port. A silver shipment bound for Seville can change ownership through paper contracts while still weeks from land. You stand quietly, listening. Men speak in a dozen languages: Flemish, Spanish, Italian, German, French. They carry no heavy chests, no bags of coin clinking at their sides. Instead, they carry quills and scraps of paper. Transactions are made with a handshake, a quick note, a mark in a ledger. The real cargo will arrive later, but the profits, or losses, are already being measured. For the first time, money itself seems to move faster than goods. It flows invisibly through promises, contracts, and bonds. The mystery lies in the trust that underpins it all. How can one merchant agree to pay another for a cargo not yet seen? How can fortunes shift on the faith that a ship will survive the storms of the Atlantic? Yet in this hall, that trust becomes as solid as coin. Records survive, even now, of these trades. Thin slips of parchment, inked with names and sums, fragile yet powerful. They reveal contracts on wool, on spices, on silver, on copper. They show how risk was spread. A merchant might buy a share of a cargo, a fraction of its profit, rather than take the whole venture himself. In this way, many men share the risk, and many share the gain. Imagine the rhythm of it. The shuffle of boots across stone floors, the clatter of quills as clerks jot notes on benches at the side, the murmur of voices rising and falling. Sunlight slants through tall windows, catching motes of dust in the air. The crowd swells at midday, then thins slowly as the bells of evening toll. Outside, Antwerp thrives. Inns are crowded with sailors, warehouses brim with goods waiting to be moved inland. Streets echo with wagons, carrying bales of cloth, barrels of wine, chests of coin. The whole city hums with commerce, fueled not only by what is present, but by what is expected. To a man like Jacob Fugger, Antwerp was both opportunity and risk. He lent money to kings and princes, but here in the Bourse, he could also place his fortune into contracts that spanned the seas. For a new kind of wealth was emerging. Wealth not tied to land or even to silver, but to speculation, to the quiet calculation of what might be. And yet, there was always uncertainty. A storm could sink a fleet. A rebellion could close a port. A single piece of news shouted across the hall could turn profit to loss in an instant. The Bourse was a place of steady voices and calm agreements, but beneath it all pulsed the restless risk of the unknown. As you step back out into the streets, the sounds of Antwerp surround you once more. The calls of vendors, the creak of carts, the distant cry of gulls over the Scheldt River. The evening air smells of smoke and salt, bread baking and fish frying in oil. The city feels alive, stretched between certainty and chance. This was the mystery of Antwerp, a place where fortunes were made not only with hands and ships, but with paper and trust. A place where the very idea of money began to shift. From weight in a chest, to ink on a page, to the invisible flow of promises across seas. Quietly, steadily, the modern world of finance was being born. It is early morning in the hills outside Madrid. The light of dawn spreads slowly across the horizon, touching the pale stone of an immense structure that rises from the landscape like both a fortress and a monastery. This is El Escorial, the palace of King Philip II of Spain. Approach the gates, and you notice at once how different it feels from the palaces of other rulers. There are no glittering golden facades, no playful gardens filled with fountains, no bright mosaics. Instead, the walls are heavy and sober, built of granite blocks, their surfaces cool and grey. The lines are strict, the shapes square, the towers plain. It is a building of discipline, not of indulgence. Step inside, and the air is cool and hushed. Your footsteps echo softly against stone floors, polished by years of use. The scent is faintly of lime dust and beeswax candles, mixed with the cool dryness of stone. Corridors stretch long and narrow, lined with plain wooden doors and tall windows that admit shafts of pale light. Imagine yourself as a court servant, rising at dawn to prepare the palace. The rhythm of your day begins with silence. You carry candles through dim passages, lighting sconces one by one. The flames flicker, sending shadows dancing across the walls. The palace stirs slowly, but without hurry. Everything here moves at a measured pace. Philip II himself is already awake. He is a man of strict habits, deeply devout, his life shaped by ritual as much as by politics. He dresses simply for a king, a black doublet of velvet, sober and without ornament, a ruff around his neck, a golden chain at most. His face is serious, his eyes dark, his posture composed. Even in wealth, he projects restraint. He begins his day with prayer. In the chapel, the air smells of incense, heavy and sweet. Candles burn in golden holders, their flames steady, casting a warm glow on stone walls. The murmur of Latin chants fills the space, slow and rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. The king kneels, his hands folded, his head bowed. For Philip, wealth is not luxury, but duty. Every coin, every ingot of silver belongs first to God, then to the crown. After prayer comes business. In a chamber lined with wooden panels, Philip sits at a desk of dark oak. The surface is covered in neat stacks of papers, sealed letters and ledgers. Courtiers enter quietly, bow, and place documents before him. He reads each one carefully, his quill scratching as he makes notes in the margins. There is no flourish, no distraction. Each decision is weighed with the patience of a man who sees himself not as a master of wealth, but as its steward. Around him, the palace is alive, though softly. Servants move with quiet steps, carrying trays of bread and wine, fetching water in copper basins. Guards stand watch in echoing halls, their armor polished but plain. Courtiers whisper in corners, waiting for audiences that may take hours, sometimes days, to grant. The sound of the palace is muted, like a constant hum beneath the stone. Step outside into the courtyard. The sun now shines fully, warming the granite, softening its severity with pale gold. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of rosemary and orange blossoms from the surrounding gardens. Even here, in the open air, there is symmetry, order, and restraint. The fountains bubble quietly, their sound steady and calm. Birds circle overhead, their cries distant and faint. To live within El Escorial is to live within discipline. Meals are plain but nourishing: bread, olives, roasted meats, and wine. Conversations are careful, voices low, gestures measured. There are no extravagant banquets, no lavish displays of jewels or silks. Instead, there is routine: prayer, paperwork, counsel, reflection. And yet, behind this quiet exterior lies immense wealth. In chests within the palace lie documents representing millions of ducats. In harbors far away, Spanish galleons unload tons of silver from the New World. From Seville to Naples, from Mexico to Manila, Philip's empire stretches across oceans. But here, within these granite walls, the wealth feels subdued, not celebrated, but hidden, transformed into duty, into silence. As evening falls, the bells of the chapel toll softly. Shadows lengthen across the courtyard, the air cooling once more. Servants light torches and candles, their flames flickering in the growing darkness. Philip retreats to his private chamber, a small, austere room with little more than a bed, a chair, and a crucifix. He kneels again in prayer, whispering quietly, the sound barely audible. And you too walk slowly through the corridors, listening to the echo of your own footsteps. The air is cool, the stone around you vast and still. El Escorial is not a palace of joy, but of solemn wealth. Wealth that feels like burden. Wealth that weighs as heavily as the granite blocks that form its walls. Imagine the paradox of ruling the richest empire on earth, and yet finding your treasury empty. This was the strange reality of Philip II of Spain, the man who commanded oceans, colonies, and rivers of silver, yet faced bankruptcy not once, but several times during his reign. Picture him seated at his desk in El Escorial, the afternoon sun slanting through high windows, falling across piles of documents. On the surface before him are reports from Seville, fleets arriving from the New World, their holds heavy with silver from Potosi and Zacatecas. The numbers are staggering, ship after ship unloading ingots, each stamped and stacked, shimmering in torchlight as they are carried into royal warehouses. To any observer, it might seem inexhaustible wealth. Silver coins struck from these ingots flood Europe. They pay soldiers on the frontiers, supply fleets, fill the purses of merchants, and line the vaults of bankers. The sound of it rings everywhere. The clink of coins in taverns, the scrape of scales in marketplaces, the hammer of mints striking new reals. And yet, the king frowns as he scans his ledgers, for as quickly as the silver arrives, it disappears. Wars devour it. Spain's armies are fast, scattered across the Netherlands, Italy, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Their wages alone consume fortunes. Ships must be built, their timbers hauled from forests, their sails woven from acres of cloth, their cannons forged from iron. Each armada drains more silver than the last. Then there are debts. For years, Philip has borrowed heavily from bankers in Augsburg, Genoa, and Venice. Each loan carries interest. Each repayment comes due. Even as silver pours in, creditors press for their share. And when the flow of treasure slows, when storms sink fleets or pirates intercept galleons, the crown falters. In 1557, again in 1560, again in 1575, and again in 1596, Philip declares bankruptcy. The richest monarch in the world cannot pay his bills. Imagine the confusion this brings. A merchant in Antwerp, expecting repayment, receives nothing but promises. A banker in Genoa tightens his grip, demanding higher interest on future loans. Trust trembles. And yet, paradoxically, the cycle continues. For who else can they lend to, if not the King of Spain? His empire stretches across continents. His silver, though delayed, always returns eventually. So even after bankruptcy, money continues to flow his way. Walk with him through the palace in the evening. His steps are slow, his face solemn. He does not flaunt his wealth, does not indulge in endless banquets or glittering jewels. Instead, he carries it as a burden. To Philip, silver is not for pleasure, but for service. To defend the Catholic faith, to uphold his empire, to pursue what he believes is divine duty. Yet even his piety cannot balance the books. At last, the fleet neared Spain. Sailors cheered as they sighted the mouth of the Guadalquivir River. The ships turned slowly, moving inland towards Seville. The air grew warmer, the riverbanks lush with greenery. Bells rang as news spread. The treasure fleet had arrived. On the docks, crowds gathered. Merchants, officials, and curious townsfolk pressed forward to watch as the ships were unloaded. Chests of silver and gold were carried down gangplanks under guard, their iron corners gleaming in the sun. The sound of coins clinking together echoed as crates were set down. Spices filled the air with unfamiliar scents: cinnamon, cloves, pepper. Exotic goods piled high, a dazzling display of wealth from across the seas. Yet even here, the secrecy remained. Officials from the Casa de Contratación, the House of Trade, counted and recorded each chest. Every ingot was weighed, every coin checked. A portion was claimed immediately for the crown. The rest went to creditors, merchants, and bankers who had financed the voyage. Few ever saw the treasure in its raw form. Most of it flowed quickly, almost invisibly, into debts, wages, and new ventures. Imagine the sound of it. Coins tumbling into scales, quills scratching across parchment, clerks murmuring figures aloud. The rhythm is steady, precise, almost soothing. Wealth, immense and glittering, reduced to numbers in neat columns. As evening falls, the galleons rest quietly at anchor, their sails hang limp, their decks empty. Lanterns sway in the night breeze, their flames glowing softly. The cargo is gone, the treasure dispersed, the holds silent once more. Soon repairs will begin, and the cycle will repeat. Another voyage, another fleet, another river of silver carried across the sea. The galleons, like the empire itself, seem vast and powerful, and yet they are fragile. A storm, a battle, a simple miscalculation could send it all to the depths. To be a millionaire in this world was to rest your fortune on ships that swayed in the wind, caught between calm seas and sudden disaster. And so, even in wealth, there was always uncertainty. High in the Andes, where the air is thin and the mountains stretch sharp against the sky, there rises one peak unlike any other. The Spanish called it Cerro Rico, the rich mountain. To stand at its base in the late 16th century is to stand at the heart of a global empire. The mountain towers above you, its slopes bare and reddish, scarred by countless tunnels and tracks. Sunlight gleams off its rocky surface, while the air around it is alive with motion. Caravans of mules climb the narrow paths, their hooves striking sparks from the stone. Each animal carries heavy sacks of ore, their backs bowed under the load, their breath steaming in the cold. The sound of their bells jingles faintly, carried by the wind. The city of Potosi sprawls below, crowded with life. By 1600, it is one of the largest cities in the world, home to more than 150,000 people. Merchants, priests, miners, soldiers, artisans, and countless laborers. Its streets are busy at all hours, echoing with voices in Spanish, Quechua, Aymara, and dozens of other tongues. The air is filled with a strange mix of scents. The smoke of furnaces, the sweetness of roasting maize, the pungent smell of animals and hides. As you walk through the streets, you see the contrasts clearly. At one corner, a grand church rises, its bell tower reaching high, its walls carved in stone, brought at great expense. Gold leaf glimmers faintly on the altar within, glowing in candlelight. Outside, however, the houses of miners are simple, made of mud and stone, their roofs thatched, their walls rough, their doors hanging loosely on wooden hinges. Step closer to the mountain, and you hear the steady beat of hammers. Miners work in narrow tunnels, chiseling ore from the rock, the sound ringing out in dull rhythm. The air is damp and close, carrying the smell of earth and sweat. Torches sputter, casting trembling shadows on the walls. Men carry sacks of ore on their backs, stumbling under the weight, their faces streaked with dust. Some are free laborers, drawn by the hope of wages. Many are forced to work under the mita, the draft system that brings indigenous men from villages across the Andes. At the smelting houses, the ore is transformed. Large furnaces roar with heat, fueled by wood and charcoal carried from distant forests. The air is thick with smoke, acrid and stinging, while sparks leap into the air like fireflies. Workers feed the furnaces steadily, their faces glowing red in the heat, their bodies slick with sweat, despite the chill of the mountain air. Bars of silver are poured from the molds, glowing white-hot, then cooling to a dull, gray sheen. Each bar is stamped with marks of origin, a symbol of wealth that will soon travel across oceans. In council chambers, ministers whisper anxiously. Inflation rises across Spain. Prices for bread and oil climb steadily. driven by the endless influx of silver. The common people feel it most. A farmer who once bought a loaf of bread for 1 coin must now pay 2. Wages lag behind and hardship grows. The very treasure meant to enrich Spain seems instead to erode its foundations. Still, the king writes. His quill scratches steadily, his eyes fixed on columns of numbers. He authorizes new loans, new fleets, new campaigns. Each decision is precise, deliberate, yet shadowed by inevitability. The silver will come and it will vanish, and he will borrow again. At night, in his private chamber, he kneels before a crucifix. The stone floor is cold beneath him, the candlelight soft against the walls. His prayer is steady, his voice low. Perhaps he prays for guidance, perhaps for strength, perhaps simply for patience. For though he is the richest monarch of his age, he knows that his wealth is not freedom, but a chain, binding him to debts, to wars, to endless obligations. The paradox remains, to sit at the center of a treasure so vast that it dazzles the world, yet to feel always the press of insufficiency. To be rich beyond measure, and yet never rich enough. If silver was the lifeblood of Spain's empire, then the galleons were its veins. Across the 16th century, fleets of great ships carried treasure from the New World to the ports of Seville, transforming oceans into highways of wealth. Yet with each voyage came danger, secrecy, and the constant fear of loss. Imagine standing on the docks of Veracruz in New Spain. The year is 1570. The sun beats down on a crowded harbor where massive wooden ships sway gently at anchor. Their hulls are dark, thick with tar to protect against worms and salt. Tall masts creak as rigging pulls taut in the breeze. Around you, sailors and laborers bustle, shouting as they load cargo. The air is heavy with the smell of pitch, sweat, and the faint sweetness of cacao beans packed into barrels. In the warehouses nearby, chests of silver lie ready for loading. Each chest is reinforced with iron, bound tightly, sealed with wax. Inside, neatly stacked bars glitter faintly, stamped with marks of origin. Soldiers stand watch, their armor gleaming, halberds at their sides. But this is not ordinary cargo. This is the treasure of empires. Step aboard one of the galleons. The deck is broad, worn smooth by countless boots. Coils of rope lie neatly stacked. Cannon barrels jut from open ports, and sailors move constantly, adjusting sails, repairing lines, scrubbing planks. Below deck, the air grows close, smelling of wood, salt, and tar. Here, chests of treasure are secured with iron locks, guarded night and day. Beside them are other goods: cochineal dye, cacao, tobacco, hides. The wealth of a continent packed tightly in the dimness of the hold. When the fleet departs, the harbor erupts in sound. Bells toll, sailors shout, drums beat. Slowly, the ships catch the wind and move into open water. The sea stretches endlessly ahead, a shimmering expanse of blue. For weeks, sometimes months, the fleet sails in close formation, protecting one another. Each day follows its rhythm. Dawn prayers, the trimming of sails, meals of hardtack and salted meat, the steady labor of keeping the ship alive. But the journey is never certain. Storms roll suddenly across the Atlantic. Black clouds gather, winds whip the waves into towering walls. Rain lashes the deck. The galleons creak and groan as they rise and plunge, their timbers straining, sails torn, masts bending. Sailors cling to ropes, shouting into the roar, their voices carried away by the storm. In such moments, entire fortunes could vanish. A single shipwreck could swallow treasure worth kingdoms. And often, many did. There were other dangers too. Pirates and privateers lurked, waiting in hidden coves, watching for isolated vessels. English captains like Francis Drake struck suddenly, their cannons blazing, their men boarding with swords drawn. For this reason, the treasure fleets sailed together, heavily armed, guarded by warships. And always, secrecy was enforced. Exact sailing dates, routes, and cargo lists were closely guarded, known only to a few. From here, caravans depart constantly. Mules loaded with silver bars make their way down winding mountain roads, guarded by soldiers, bound for Lima and then for the ports of Panama or Callao. From there, the treasure will sail to Seville, feeding the hunger of kings and creditors alike. But here, at the foot of Cerro Rico, wealth feels different. It is not the glitter of coins on a counting table, nor the neat columns of a banker's ledger. It is dust, sweat, smoke, and exhaustion. It is the endless rhythm of picks striking stone, the groan of carts, the hiss of molten metal. And yet, life in Potosi has its own vitality. In the marketplace, merchants sell coca leaves to miners, bread baked in clay ovens, woven cloth dyed bright colors. Children run between stalls, their laughter high and clear. Musicians play flutes and drums in the evenings, their songs carrying into the night air. Amid hardship, there is also community, noise, and survival. As the sun sets, the mountain glows red, catching the last light of day. The air grows colder, sharp in your lungs. Smoke from the furnaces drifts upward, mingling with the clouds. The city lights flicker below, torches, lanterns, and the glow of hearts. Above it all, Cerro Rico looms, vast and unyielding, a silent giant that seems almost alive. Standing here, you feel its presence. This mountain is both blessing and curse. It has made kings wealthy, fueled empires, and reshaped economies across oceans. But it has also consumed lives, demanded endless labor, and left scars that will never fade. As darkness falls, the sounds quiet. The mules are tethered, the furnaces banked, the streets hushed. Only the mountain remains, looming above, its slopes shadowed, its riches still locked within. Silent, patient, waiting for the next day's labor to begin again. The silver drawn from Cerro Rico did not remain in the Andes. It traveled far, down winding roads, across mountain passes, along rivers, and over oceans, from Potosi to Lima, from Panama to Seville, and from there into every corner of Europe. And as it spread, it changed the world. Imagine yourself in Seville, standing in the warehouse of the Casa de Contratación, the House of Trade. Before you are stacked bars of silver, each stamped with the marks of Potosi. They gleam faintly in the lamplight, heavy and cold. Clerks move among them, weighing, recording, noting each piece in thick ledgers. Soldiers guard the doors, their halberds gleaming, for the value contained here is beyond measure. The silver flows into the mint, where coins are struck. Picture the rhythmic hammering. A blank of metal placed, a die pressed, the sharp ring as it is struck into form. When the hammer lifts, a new reel or escudo lies shining. The coins are gathered, bagged, and sent out into circulation. Soon they will pass from hand to hand, clinking in purses, scraped across scales in marketplaces, slipped across tavern tables, or stacked neatly in bankers' vaults. At first, the effect is dazzling. Kings pay their armies, debts are repaid, merchants see their coffers swell, markets bloom with goods. Silk from Italy, spices from Asia, furs from the Baltic, grain from the plains. Silver oils the machinery of commerce. making exchanges smoother, faster, more plentiful. But slowly, something unexpected stirs. Prices begin to rise. A loaf of bread that once cost a single coin now costs two. A jug of wine that once bought a day's wages now takes 2 days. The common people mutter in confusion. Their coins seem to buy less and less, though the metal is the same. This is the price revolution, the great inflation of the 16th century. Imagine yourself as a craftsman in Toledo. You work long hours shaping iron tools, your hands rough, your back sore. At the end of the week, you receive your pay, the same number of coins as always. Yet when you go to market, the prices are higher. You buy less bread, less oil, fewer candles. Each week, the weight of your labor seems to shrink. For the wealthy, it is different. Merchants and nobles who hold land or control silver mines see their fortunes grow. Their rents increase, their goods sell for higher prices, their investments multiply. But for laborers and peasants, the change feels like a tightening noose. It is morning in Istanbul, once Constantinople, the city that bridges two continents. The first light of day glimmers on the domes and minarets, their silhouettes rising against the pale sky. From every direction, the call to prayer drifts softly across the air, weaving together into a gentle chorus that settles over the city like a breath. The streets begin to stir. Merchants unlatch their stalls. Apprentices sweep the stone pavements. Porters adjust the straps across their shoulders. And at the heart of the city lies the bazaar, a vast maze of covered passageways, arched in brick and stone, filled with light, sound, and the movement of trade. Step inside, and you're enveloped. The air is heavy with scents, cinnamon sharp and sweet, cardamom warm and earthy, pepper biting at the nose, cloves sweet and lingering. Incense drifts in curling smoke from brass burners, mingling with the smell of leather, wool, and freshly ground coffee. It is an air thick with richness, a tapestry woven from faraway lands. The sound is constant, but not harsh. Voices rise and fall in bargaining tones: Turkish, Greek, Arabic, Armenian, Italian. Merchants call out prices. Apprentices repeat them. Customers murmur replies. Coins clink faintly in purses. Scales scrape as weights are adjusted. The steady rhythm of trade unfolding with practiced ease. Look around, and each stall is a world of its own. Here, a jeweler lays out strings of pearls, each one glowing softly in the filtered light. Rings of gold glimmer with red and green gems, their surfaces catching the eye, their weight cool in the hand. Next to him, another merchant spreads bolts of silk, shimmering blues and deep crimsons, their threads smooth and light, almost fluid to the touch. Across the passage, a spice seller measures carefully. His jars are filled with powders and seeds in every shade. Saffron golden as sunlight, pepper black and glossy, nutmeg brown and round, cinnamon curled in fragrant scrolls. He pours a small measure into your hand, and the scent rises sharply, filling your nose with fire and warmth. Further on, a coffee seller roasts beans in a shallow pan. The crackle is soft, the aroma rich and earthy, curling upward in steam that clings to the air. Small cups are set out, porcelain delicate and white, filled with dark liquid, thick and sweetened with sugar. The taste is bitter, strong, and lingering. A new drink, one that spreads slowly across the empire, carrying with it a sense of wakefulness and gathering. The bazaar is not only a place of goods, but of movement. Porters shuffle past with loads strapped to their backs. their footsteps slow and steady. Officials in long robes walk with measured pace, their turbans tall and white, their beards combed neatly. Pilgrims pass through on their way to the great mosques, their faces lined from travel, their eyes lifted in quiet wonder. The flow is endless, steady, like the tide. At midday, the light slants through high windows, casting stripes of brightness across the stone floor. Dust floats in the beams, shimmering faintly as voices continue to rise and fall. The rhythm of trade does not break. Coins pass from hand to hand. Parchment contracts are signed. Goods are weighed and wrapped. Step outside for a moment into the courtyard, and you hear the city beyond. The neigh of horses, the creak of wagons, the distant call of gulls over the Bosphorus. The smell of roasting meat drifts from nearby stalls, mingling with smoke from wood fires. Istanbul hums all around, a city alive with wealth, belief, and endless exchange. As evening approaches, the bazaar quiets slowly. Stalls are covered, shutters drawn, goods locked away in wooden chests. The air grows cooler, the scents fainter, though they linger still on your hands and clothes. Lamps are lit, their light soft and golden, casting long shadows along the arches. The day's business is done, but its rhythm remains in your mind. The murmur of bargaining, the scrape of scales, the faint clink of silver coins. In this place, fortunes are not shouted, but whispered, measured in the weight of spice, the shimmer of silk, the glint of a jewel under lamplight. Here, at the heart of the Ottoman frontier, wealth is not only counted, but experienced. In scent, in sound, in touch. And as night settles over the city, the bazaar sleeps, ready to wake again with the dawn, to repeat its endless, steady hum. Step inside one. The air is cool, smelling faintly of polished wood and lime plaster. A marble staircase curves upward, its surface smooth beneath your hand. On the walls are frescoes, vast painted scenes of myths and saints, their colors deep and luminous even in dim light. Angels float above columns, gods wrestle, triumph, and recline. Each figure is painted with care, not only to delight the eye, but to signal erudition, refinement, and wealth. In the great hall, long tables are prepared for a feast. Platters of food are arranged in symmetry. Roasted game seasoned with pepper. Loaves of bread, glazed golden. Bowls of olives glistening with oil. Dishes of figs and oranges brought from distant orchards. The scent fills the hall, mingling with the sweet perfume of wine spiced with cinnamon and cloves. Candles flicker in silver holders, their flames dancing, sending soft light across polished goblets and gilded plates. Guests arrive slowly, cloaked in velvet, their garments embroidered with gold thread. Women wear gowns of silk dyed in rich crimson and deep blue, colors so costly that they are themselves a sign of fortune. Men carry themselves with deliberate ease, their collars stiff, their chains of office or family glimmering in the light. Voices rise in polite greeting, low laughter, the soft scrape of chairs being drawn. Music begins. A small group of musicians sits in one corner, playing lutes and viols. The melodies are slow, flowing, a gentle accompaniment to the murmur of conversation. The air vibrates with harmony. The clink of glasses, the notes of string instruments, the rustle of silk sleeves. The feast proceeds not in haste, but in measured courses. First, delicate dishes, salads of herbs, small cakes of cheese. Then heavier fare, roasted meats, stews rich with saffron, pies filled with fruit. Between courses, servants glide silently, refilling cups, replacing platters. The rhythm is calm, almost ritualistic, more than a meal. a display of refinement, of power expressed through abundance. Above all, the luxury lies not only in what is eaten or seen, but in the experience of leisure itself. To sit in a painted hall, to dine on foods flavored with spices from half a world away, to hear music while drinking wine from goblets of silver. This is to transform fortune into culture. And beyond the hall, the palazzo itself speaks. The ceilings are painted with stars and gilded patterns. The floors are inlaid with marble tiles that shine under candlelight. In private chambers, cabinets display objects collected from distant lands: Venetian glass, porcelain from China, carved ivory, and finely bound books. Each object is a conversation, a story of trade and travel, a symbol of reach. Yet even amid this abundance, restraint lingers. Italian luxury is not wild indulgence, but balance. The frescoes are carefully chosen, the music refined, the feast orderly. The wealth is displayed, but with elegance, with a sense of control. For in this society, to show too much excess is vulgar, but to show too little is weakness. The art lies in harmony. As the evening wanes, the music softens. Candles burn lower. Shadows lengthen on frescoed walls. Guests withdraw slowly, their voices fading into the night. Servants clear the tables. The scent of spices still hanging faintly in the air. In the quiet, the palazzo glows softly, a jewel set in the heart of the city. To be wealthy in 16th century Italy is not merely to own silver, but to turn silver into beauty, into halls that echo with music, into walls that bloom with painted saints and gods, into tables laden with foods that carry the flavors of distant seas. It is wealth translated into culture, into an experience that endures even as coins change hands and ledgers close. And so, when you walk again into the dark streets of Genoa or Florence, you carry the impression with you. The glow of candles, the scent of saffron, the sound of lutes, the memory of luxury that is not noise or glitter, but calm abundance. Picture one of these bankers at work. He is not dressed like a noble or a king. His robe is of dark wool, plain and practical. His chamber is modest, though the table before him is covered in thick ledgers and contracts. The smell of ink fills the air, mingled with the faint tang of sealing wax. Outside, the sounds of the harbor drift faintly in. The creak of ropes, the cry of gulls, the splash of oars. Here, in these quiet rooms, Spain's silver was transformed into credit. The Genoese perfected systems of transferring money across Europe without the need for physical coins. Through bills of exchange, letters of credit, and carefully balanced accounts, they made it possible for Philip II to pay his armies in Flanders, his fleets in the Mediterranean, and his officials in Italy, all without carrying endless chests of silver across dangerous seas. The system was ingenious. Instead of sending coin, the crown would borrow from Genoese bankers, who would then arrange for funds to be available in Antwerp, Milan, or Naples. In return, when the silver fleets arrived safely in Seville, repayment was made. The Genoese took their share: interest, fees, and often even privileges in trade. In this way, Spain's empire rested not only on soldiers and ships, but on the invisible trust of bankers far away. It was said at the time that the Genoese were the king's purse. Without them, Spain could not have maintained its wars or its administration. They were the hidden creditors, never seen in the grand ceremonies of Madrid, but always present in the background, their quills scratching quietly, their ledgers filling with numbers that determine the course of empires. Imagine one of these negotiations. A Spanish envoy arrives in Genoa, cloaked in the authority of the crown, yet burdened by its debts. He sits across from a banker in a candle-lit chamber, the air heavy with the scent of oil lamps. Papers are spread across the table, sums read aloud, terms debated. The envoy pleads for lower rates. The banker insists on higher guarantees. At last, an agreement is struck. A handshake seals it, followed by signatures and seals pressed into wax. The crown has its funds, and the banker has secured both profit and influence. And yet, for all their power, the Genoese lived under constant tension. A single shipwreck, a single lost fleet, could unravel the delicate balance. If the silver did not arrive, repayment faltered. The crown, as we know, declared bankruptcy multiple times. Each time, Genoese creditors absorbed the shock, restructuring loans, renegotiating terms, adjusting their ledgers. To survive, they spread their risks, collaborated, and wove their financial webs ever tighter. Still, their fortunes were immense. Families like the Spinola, the Doria, and the Grimaldi amassed wealth that rivaled princes. Their palaces in Genoa rose high, their walls painted with frescoes, their halls echoing with music. Yet even these displays were restrained compared to the quiet power they wielded through ink and numbers. Step through the streets of Genoa at dusk. The lamps glow faintly, casting long shadows across narrow alleys. Merchants close their shutters, sailors gather in taverns, voices rising in song. And at the counting houses, the bankers still work. Their quills move steadily, their ledgers filling with sums that tie New World silver to Old World wars. It is a paradox, much like Philip's own fortune. Spain, master of oceans and mountains of silver, was in truth dependent on this small republic and its quiet financiers. The empire's lifeblood ran not only through the veins of galleons, but through the careful columns of Genoese ledgers. To be a millionaire in this world was not always to command armies or build palaces. Sometimes it was simply to sit at a wooden table, a quill in hand, and to lend money to kings. In 16th century Italy, wealth was not hidden in chests or buried in ledgers alone. It was displayed carefully and beautifully in stone, paint, and ritual. To be a wealthy merchant or banker here was not simply to count coins, but to surround yourself with a culture of luxury that made your fortune visible to all who entered your world. Imagine walking through the streets of Genoa or Florence at dusk. The lamps are being lit, one by one, their glow falling across the facades of tall houses. Yet some houses are not like the others. Their walls rise higher, their windows larger, their doors carved with intricate designs. These are the palazzi of the merchant elite. The first task of the day is correspondence. Letters arrive from Alexandria, Constantinople, Lisbon. Each carries news of caravans and ships, pepper harvested in India, cinnamon loaded onto vessels in Ceylon, silk carried overland from China to Ottoman ports. Every shipment is both opportunity and risk. A storm, a pirate raid, a delay at customs, any could erase the profits recorded in these ledgers. Yet without risk, there is no fortune. By mid-morning, he makes his way to the Rialto, the beating heart of Venetian trade. The air hums with voices, merchants bargaining, sailors boasting, money changers calling out exchange rates. The smell is a heady mix. Spices sharp and sweet, leather newly tanned, fish pulled fresh from the lagoon. Stalls overflow with goods. bolts of cloth in brilliant colors, jars of honey, casks of wine, and everywhere the tiny wrinkled peppercorns that drive so much of Europe's hunger for trade. At the exchange tables, he meets partners and rivals alike. A Florentine merchant unrolls samples of fine cloth. A Genoese banker offers credit for a new shipment. A spice dealer from the Levant spreads a small pouch of cloves across the table. The merchant pinches one between his fingers, lifts it to his nose, inhales its sharp, fiery scent. Even in this crowded marketplace, it is clear how precious these tiny goods are. A few ounces can command a fortune. The negotiations are slow, deliberate. Voices are measured, gestures restrained. A bargain is struck, not with shouts, but with nods, notes, and the sealing of contracts. A handshake closes the deal, but the real record lies in ink, copied carefully into ledgers that will be stored in chests, guarded by locks. At midday, he returns home for a meal. Bread baked with olive oil, soft cheese, olives glistening with brine. A dish of fish, seasoned with saffron, one of the most precious spices, worth more than its weight in silver. A cup of wine from Crete, red and strong. The flavors are simple yet refined, shaped by the long reach of trade routes that stretch across continents. In the afternoon, he reviews accounts with his clerks. Shipments must be insured, payments collected, debts repaid. Every line in the ledger carries both promise and danger. He runs his hand over the parchment, feeling its rough texture, the raised ink still sharp under his fingertips. The numbers blur together, yet he reads each carefully. As the sun lowers, the Grand Canal glows gold, its ripples catching the fading light. Gondolas glide past, their lanterns flickering softly. From the windows of his palazzo, he watches the city settle into evening. The voices on the Rialto grow quieter, shutters close, torches are lit along the narrow streets. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of salt and smoke. For this Venetian merchant, wealth is not only measured in coins or jewels, but in movement, of goods, of ships, of promises written across oceans. His life is a balance of patience and risk, of waiting for ships that may or may not return, of trusting men he may never meet in lands he will never see. And yet, amid the uncertainty, Venice thrives. The city itself is a merchant, floating on water, balancing between east and west, forever enriched by the flow of trade. As night falls, the bells ring once more, steady and calm. The merchant closes his ledger, sets down his quill, and listens. The city hums softly, like the tide itself, constant, unhurried, eternal. Imagine for a moment the Spanish crown in the late 1500s. Philip II commands an empire stretching across continents, and silver from the Andes flows into his treasuries by the ton. And yet, as we have seen, this silver vanishes quickly into wars, debts, and endless expenses. How then does the crown continue to function when its coffers so often run dry? The answer lies, quietly, in Genoa. Genoa was not the sprawling market of Venice, nor the imperial court of Madrid. It was smaller, its narrow streets winding between tall stone houses, its harbor busy but modest compared to Seville. And yet, in the counting rooms of Genoese bankers, the fate of Spain's empire was often decided. What could not be carried away was sometimes thrown overboard, hidden to be retrieved later, though often never recovered. On land, too, treasure vanished. In times of rebellion or invasion, merchants and officials buried hoards of silver for safekeeping. Some were recovered, but many were not. In Spain, farmers still turn up jars of coins plowed up from forgotten fields. In the Americas, stories linger of caches hidden in caves, sealed behind stones, waiting for owners who never returned. Imagine yourself walking a quiet coastline at dusk. The waves lap gently, the air smells of salt and seaweed. Beneath the calm surface, scattered across sand and coral, lie bars of silver, coins crusted with centuries of salt, pearls dulled by time. They rest undisturbed, their glimmer hidden in darkness, their presence known only in whispers of legend. For the Spanish crown, each loss was devastating. Ships that sank took not only treasure, but the stability of finances already strained. A single lost fleet could delay payments to soldiers, spark unrest in the Netherlands, or force new loans from weary bankers. To kings and ministers, the sea was both lifeline and threat, a road paved with silver, but lined with peril. Yet the mysteries of these vanished hordes also fed imagination. Sailors told tales of cursed ships, of ghostly lights over wreck sites, of treasure guarded by spirits of the drowned. Children grew up hearing of riches waiting beneath the waves, treasures glittering just out of reach, and in quiet taverns, maps were sketched on scraps of parchment, hinting at hidden wrecks and secret troves. Today, divers and explorers still search. Some have found wrecks, pulling bars of silver and gold coins from the deep, their surfaces encrusted with coral and shell. Others return empty-handed, their hopes swallowed by the same seas that claimed the ships centuries ago. But in the 16th century, for every merchant, banker, and king, the truth was the same. Much of the wealth they dreamed of, planned for, and even counted in ledgers, never arrived. It slipped away into the depths, into secrecy, into silence. And so the story of silver is not only one of abundance, but of absence. For every glittering coin in a marketplace, another lies lost in sand. For every chest stacked in a warehouse, another rests forgotten in a cave. The riches of Potosi did not all reach Europe. Many remain scattered across oceans, whispers of wealth that still stir imagination centuries later. It is dawn in Venice. The air is cool, damp with the scent of salt water, and the first light of morning glimmers on the rippling surface of the lagoon. Slowly, the city awakens. Gondolas drift silently through narrow canals, their oars dipping with soft, rhythmic splashes. Church bells toll in distant towers, their echoes carrying across water and stone. Inside a tall, narrow palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal, a wealthy merchant stirs from sleep. The shutters are opened, and light spills across painted walls and tiled floors. From his window, he sees boats already unloading on the docks. Barrels of oil, sacks of grain, crates of fruit from the mainland. But his business is not in such ordinary goods. His wealth lies in rarer things, spices, silks, and the quiet calculations of commerce. He dresses in layers of fine wool, dyed a deep black that signals dignity and prosperity. Around his shoulders he drapes a cloak lined with fur, though the morning air is mild. On his fingers glimmer rings of gold, set with small gems. Such displays are subtle but unmistakable, the marks of a man whose fortunes stretch far beyond the city's walls. The counting house below his residence is already alive. Clerks sit at long wooden tables, their quills scratching steadily across parchment. Ledgers lie open, their pages filled with neat columns of numbers and names. The smell of ink mingles with that of wax candles and parchment, an aroma of business as familiar as bread baking in an oven. The effect spreads across Europe. In Antwerp, merchants marvel at the abundance of silver, yet struggle with rising costs. In Venice, bankers adapt, adjusting interest rates, devising new contracts to protect against inflation. In Augsburg, the Fugger family counts their profits, lending silver to kings and popes alike. Everywhere, the influx of treasure reshapes economies, pushing wealth upward while pressing harder on the poor. But the silver does not stop in Europe. Much of it flows onward, eastward, across the Mediterranean, through trade routes into the Ottoman Empire, and further still into Persia, India, and China. In Beijing, Spanish silver coins are prized for their reliability, melted down, and recast into ingots. In the bustling markets of Canton, they pay for silk and porcelain. From the Andes to Asia, the metal of Cerro Rico travels, its journey unbroken, a river of silver circling the globe. And yet, for all its brilliance, it carries shadows. Inflation fuels unrest. Wars, once paid easily, grow ever more costly. Kings, drowning in silver, still fall into debt. The very metal that was meant to strengthen empires strains them instead, leaving treasuries empty even as warehouses overflow. Picture a European marketplace in 1580. The stalls are bright with goods, bolts of cloth dyed rich colors, baskets of fruit, barrels of wine. The air smells of spices, smoke, and freshly baked bread. Voices rise in bargaining. Laughter mingles with complaint. But beneath the noise lies a quiet unease. Coins are more plentiful than ever, yet no one feels secure. As night falls, you hear the clink of silver still, in taverns, in counting houses, in the purses of soldiers. It is the same sound heard in the mines of Potosi, in the mints of Seville, in the markets of Canton. A sound that carries both promise and burden. The price revolution is not a sudden storm, but a slow tide, steady, relentless. It reshapes lives across continents. To be a millionaire in this world is to ride that tide, rising higher as others sink. Wealth grows, but so does fragility. The very silver that built empires also begins to erode them. For every chest of silver that reached Seville, another was lost. The oceans that carried Spain's treasure fleets were vast, restless, and unforgiving. Storms, pirates, and sheer misfortune swallowed fortunes whole, scattering wealth across the seafloor. Even today, the whereabouts of much of that silver remains a mystery. Imagine a galleon heavy with treasure leaving Havana in the late 16th century. Its holds are packed with silver bars from Potosi, sacks of cochineal dye, crates of cacao, and boxes of pearls. The sails billow in the Caribbean wind, and the ship creaks as it cuts through waves. Soldiers pace the deck, their armor glinting faintly in the sun, while below the treasure rests in darkness, secured behind iron locks. But the sea is never predictable. Black clouds gather quickly on the horizon, winds rising, waves building. The galleon groans as the storm strikes, rain lashing the deck, lightning splitting the sky. Water surges across the planks, sailors cry out, ropes snap, masts bend under the force. In the chaos, the ship lists, tilts, and then slips beneath the waves. The treasure, bars, coins, jewels, vanishes in moments, sinking into the dark silence of the sea. Such losses were frequent enough that whole fleets disappeared. In 1554, a hurricane off the coast of Florida sent 3 treasure ships to the bottom. In 1622, the galleon Nuestra Senora de Atocha sank near the Florida Keys, carrying hundreds of silver bars, thousands of coins, and chests of emeralds. For centuries, her cargo lay hidden, discovered only in modern times. But many others remain unfound, their wealth still resting quietly on the ocean floor. And not all treasure was lost to storms. Pirates and privateers prowled the seas, watching for stragglers from the Spanish convoys. Picture the sudden appearance of an English ship on the horizon, its sails dark against the sun, its cannons ready. Gunfire thunders, smoke fills the air, sailors shout as grappling hooks bite into wood. In the frenzy of combat, holds are broken open, chests dragged onto decks, coins spilling across planks before being swept hastily into sacks. In the 16th century, as Spain gathered silver from the New World and Italian bankers tallied their ledgers, another figure ruled across the eastern Mediterranean with a wealth that seemed equally boundless. Suleiman, called the Magnificent in the West and the lawgiver in his own lands, was the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Imagine him in his palace in Istanbul, the Topkapi, overlooking the Bosphorus. The sea sparkles in the sunlight, ships glide slowly across the strait, and beyond the walls of the palace stretches the largest empire of the age, from Hungary to Arabia, from North Africa to Mesopotamia. Suleiman's domains are vast, and from each flows tribute, taxes, and gifts. The Sultan himself is a man of presence, tall with a commanding gaze. He wears robes woven of silk and embroidered with gold thread, their colors deep and luminous. His turban rises high, wrapped in layers of white cloth, a symbol of both faith and majesty. At his waist rests a jeweled sword, though it is seldom drawn. For Suleiman's power lies not in a single weapon, but in the machinery of empire that surrounds him. Picture the palace treasury. It is a hall lined with strong chests and gilded cabinets. Within are coins struck in gold and silver, their surfaces gleaming faintly in the lamplight. Alongside them lie gifts from foreign rulers: Venetian glass, Persian carpets, Indian jewels, Chinese porcelain. Each object whispers of distant lands carried to Istanbul by caravans and fleets. The smell of cedarwood from the cabinets mingles with the faint tang of metal and incense. Wealth for Suleiman was not merely a matter of accumulation, but of display. When he processed through the streets of Istanbul, the air filled with the sound of drums and trumpets, and his retinue shimmered with silks, brocades, and gilded armor. Crowds pressed close to glimpse the Sultan, their voices rising in cheers. The magnificence was deliberate, a statement that the ruler was not just a man, but the embodiment of empire itself. Yet behind the display lay careful administration. Suleiman was known for reforming the laws of his realm, ensuring that taxes were collected fairly, that justice was consistent, that wealth flowed not only into palaces, but into the machinery of governance. He built mosques, schools, and bridges, endowing them with revenue from lands and markets. His wealth was not idle. It was woven into the structure of daily life across his empire. Imagine, too, the trade that sustained this grandeur. Caravans crossed the deserts, their camels laden with spices, silk, and jewels. Ships sailed the Mediterranean, carrying grain, cloth, and timber. In the markets of Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad, coins bearing the Sultan's name clinked steadily across tables. The flow of commerce bound the empire together, feeding its cities, enriching its treasury, and extending its reach. Suleiman's court was also a place of refinement. Poets recited verses, calligraphers traced elegant lines of Arabic script, and artisans crafted tiles of blue and white that still shine in the domes of his mosques. The air in the palace gardens was heavy with the scent of roses and orange blossoms, fountains trickling softly as courtiers strolled among them. Wealth here was not only in metal, but in beauty, in the arts, in the order of law, in the dignity of ritual. And yet, as with all rulers, his fortune was never without tension. Wars consumed vast sums. Campaigns against Hungary, battles with Persia, naval clashes with Venice and Spain. Armies had to be supplied, fleets maintained, fortresses built. For all the magnificence of the treasury, the demands of empire were endless. Still, in his time, Suleiman stood as a symbol of balance between grandeur and governance. To his subjects, he was a ruler who embodied justice. To his rivals in Europe, he was a sovereign whose wealth and reach seemed unassailable. His empire stretched across seas and deserts, binding together cultures and peoples under one authority, sustained by a treasury that glittered with the riches of 3 continents. As evening settles over Istanbul, the palace glows in the fading light. Domes shimmer with gold, minarets rise in silhouette, and the sound of the call to prayer drifts across the Bosphorus once more. Within, Suleiman sits surrounded by counselors, listening, weighing, deciding. The wealth of the Ottoman Empire lies in his hands, yet he carries it not as indulgence, but as duty. For in this age, as in all others, wealth was never only possession. It was responsibility, burden, and power. A rhythm that echoed through the stones of palaces and the whispers of markets alike. In the Hanseatic world, power did not rest in kings or nobles alone. It was held, quietly but firmly, by families of merchants whose fortunes rose from the rhythm of ships and warehouses. In Lübeck, the queen of the Hanse, these families built their wealth not on sudden treasures, but on generations of careful trade. Picture one such family in the mid-1500s. Their house stands on a narrow street near the marketplace, tall and slender, built of red brick with a stepped gable facing the square. The wooden door opens onto a hall that smells faintly of salt, tar, and smoke from the harbor. Inside, the air is cool and dim, the walls lined with shelves of goods, barrels of wax, bales of cloth, bundles of rope. Above the warehouse level are the living quarters. Rooms with timbered ceilings, tiled stoves, and narrow windows overlooking the busy street below. The family's day begins early. The merchant himself rises at dawn, dressed in a simple but finely made doublet, his boots polished, his cloak plain but warm. His wife oversees the household, directing servants to prepare bread, cheese, and ale for the morning meal. Children gather around the table, their chatter mixing with the scrape of chairs and the crackle of the fire. After breakfast, the merchant walks to his counting room. It is a small chamber at the back of the house, where ledgers lie open on a heavy oak table. The smell of parchment and beeswax candles lingers in the air. With a quill in hand, he reviews notes sent from Riga, Danzig, or Bruges. One reports the arrival of a shipment of grain. Another warns of unrest that could delay trade. Each page is studied carefully, each number weighed against the family's fortune. Wealth here is not sudden, but cumulative. A successful voyage brings profit. 2 or 3 voyages build stability. Decades of voyages build dynasties. By extending credit to smaller traders, by maintaining steady networks of trust, these families secure influence that stretches far beyond Lübeck's walls. At midday, the merchant meets with partners at the town hall, a vast Gothic building whose high ceilings echo with voices. Inside, the air smells of wood smoke and ink, parchment and leather. Here, city leaders and merchant elders gather to discuss matters of trade, tariffs, and law. Their decisions ripple outward across the Baltic. shaping not only their own fortunes, but those of countless sailors, carters, and craftsmen. These families wielded influence in politics as well as trade. In Lübeck, as in many Hanseatic towns, the council was dominated by merchants. They set the rules of commerce, managed the city's defenses, and negotiated treaties with kings and princes. Their authority did not come from swords or crowns, but from ledgers, contracts, and the quiet assurance that they controlled the flow of goods essential to survival. Imagine a council meeting on a winter afternoon. Candles flicker in iron holders, their light glowing against stone walls. Voices murmur in Low German, steady and deliberate. Decisions are made about tariffs on salt, regulations for ships, contributions to defend trade routes. Each choice is practical, precise, shaped not by grandeur, but by necessity. And yet, these decisions shape nations, for when Lübeck merchants agreed on a course, kings often had little choice but to follow. In their private lives, the merchant families lived with measured comfort. Their homes were not palaces, but they contained symbols of wealth. Painted chests from Flanders, pewter dishes polished to a sheen, tapestries hung against gold walls. Meals were hearty: bread, smoked fish, stews of meat and cabbage, but sometimes flavored with rare spices brought from the south, a reminder of distant connections. Evenings were spent around the stove. The family gathered, while clerks copied contracts by candlelight. Their wealth also funded piety and charity. Churches in Lübeck gleamed with painted altarpieces and stained glass, gifts from merchant families whose fortunes paid for their beauty. Hospitals and almshouses were built, their stones carrying the names of donors who believed that generosity might ease the burdens of their souls. As night falls, the merchant closes his ledger. He sets aside his quill, sand still clinging to the fresh ink. Outside, the harbor quiets, lanterns glowing faintly on the ships at anchor. The air is cool, smelling of salt and smoke, the sea lapping softly against the wooden piers. To be a merchant in Lübeck was not to glitter with sudden riches, but to move steadily, securely, through a world of trade. Influence was measured not in jewels, but in barrels of herring, sacks of grain, chests of wax. Fortune lay not in spectacle, but in the quiet accumulation of goods, the trust of partners, the rhythm of the sea. And so, as the family rests, their fortune rests with them. In ledgers, in ships, in the steady hum of commerce that will begin again with the dawn. It is dawn on the Baltic coast. The sky is pale grey, the sea calm but restless, its waves rolling steadily toward shore. Along the harbor, wooden piers stretch into the water, their surfaces slick with salt and dew. Seagulls wheel overhead, their cries sharp, mingling with the creak of masts and the faint splash of oars. You stand in the town of Lübeck, one of the leading cities of the Hanseatic League, a network of northern merchants whose influence stretches from London to Novgorod. The air is cool, sharp with the smell of brine and tar. Slowly, the town awakens. The streets are narrow, lined with tall houses of brick, their gables stepped and pointed. Doors open onto cobbled lanes, where apprentices sweep dust into the gutters, and bakers bring out loaves still warm from their ovens. The smell of bread drifts on the morning air, mingling with the sharper scent of fish laid out at the market stalls. Step into the marketplace, and the sound swells. Voices call out in Low German, Danish, Swedish, Dutch. Merchants from across the Baltic gather here, their stalls piled with goods. Salted herring packed tightly in barrels, wax and honey from the forests of Prussia, furs from the cold lands of the north, and bolts of cloth woven in distant towns. The air is full of the mingling scents: fish, wool, smoke, and spice. Faint traces of cinnamon and pepper carried all the way from the south. The docks are even busier. Ships lie moored side by side, their tall masts swaying like a forest of bulls. Longshoremen haul barrels along wooden planks, their boots thudding heavily. The clink of iron chains, the groan of pulleys, and the calls of shipmasters echo across the water. A cargo of timber is unloaded, long, rough planks stacked high, smelling of resin and sap. Next to it, sacks of grain are carried ashore, the dust rising in faint clouds as they are dropped into warehouses. For the merchants of the Hanseatic towns, wealth lies in this steady rhythm. They do not deal in mountains of silver or sudden treasures, but in bulk, in the endless flow of essential goods. Salt from Lüneburg, herring from the Baltic, grain from Poland, wool from England, timber from Scandinavia. These are the arteries of Northern Europe, feeding cities, supplying armies, fueling workshops. Imagine yourself as a merchant here. Your counting house is modest compared to the palazzi of Venice, yet efficient. Shelves hold ledgers bound in leather, each filled with neat rows of names and numbers. On the table lies a set of scales for weighing coins, a small chest with locks, a bundle of quills, and a sand shaker to dry fresh ink. The room smells faintly of beeswax candles and parchment. Each day is a balance of calculation and trust. Ships must be outfitted, crews paid, routes agreed upon. Partners in distant towns send letters carried overland by couriers, each one describing cargoes, prices, and risks. Some news arrives weeks late, yet decisions must be made. You run your hand over the parchment, feeling its rough surface, the ink slightly raised. Each figure carries weight, each agreement a thread in the great web of trade. At midday, the town grows busier still. Church bells toll, calling out the hour. Carters rumble through the streets, with wagons piled high. The cries of sellers rise in chorus, offering fresh fish, loaves of bread, skins of ale. In a tavern by the harbor, sailors drink from heavy mugs, their voices loud with stories of storms and far-off ports. The air inside is thick with smoke, laughter, and the smell of salted meat roasting on the fire. By evening, the harbor quiets. Ships rest at anchor, their sails furled, their decks empty save for a few guards pacing slowly. The marketplace closes, stalls shuttered, goods locked away in warehouses. The streets grow dim as lanterns are lit, their glow soft and golden against the brick walls. In the stillness of night, only the sea remains constant. Its waves lap against the piers, its scent drifts through the narrow streets, its rhythm endless. To live in a Hanseatic town is to live by this rhythm. The slow, steady pulse of trade, the movement of ships, the flow of goods. Wealth here is not sudden or spectacular, but enduring. It lies in barrels of herring salted for winter, in sacks of grain stacked high in warehouses, in the simple security of goods that people will always need. It is a quieter fortune, less glittering than silver or jewels, but no less powerful in shaping lives and cities. As you drift to rest in this world, you hear the sea still, steady, soothing, eternal, as if whispering the heartbeat of commerce itself. The Ottoman Empire was not only a land of soldiers, palaces, and treasuries. It was also a vast crossroads of culture, where goods and habits from distant worlds were gathered, refined, and sent outward again. Many of the luxuries that later defined European wealth first passed through Ottoman hands, carrying with them an air of novelty, mystery, and even suspicion. One such luxury was coffee. Imagine a small coffee house in Istanbul around the mid-16th century. The room is dim, its walls plain, its benches low and simple. Yet it is filled with the rich, earthy scent of roasting beans. The beans crackle softly in shallow pans over glowing coals, their aroma drifting thick and inviting. Cups of porcelain are set before customers, filled with dark liquid that gleams almost black. A spoon stirs in sugar, dissolving slowly, while steam curls upward. The taste is bitter at first, then strong, lingering, with a depth unlike any other drink. As men sip, conversation rises, poetry is recited, politics discussed, stories told. The coffee house becomes not merely a place of refreshment, but of gathering. A new social space, at once calm and alive. When Europeans first encountered this drink, it seemed strange, even unsettling. A beverage dark as ink, stimulating rather than soothing, drawn from beans grown in Yemen and carried through Ottoman ports. Some feared it, calling it dangerous. Others embraced it, seeing in its bitterness a kind of refinement. In time, coffee houses would appear in Venice, in London, in Paris. But here, in Istanbul, the ritual begins. Another luxury was the tulip. Picture a garden in the palace of Topkapi. Rows of flowers bloom in the soft light of spring, their colors vivid, crimson, yellow, deep purple, and pale white. Their petals curve in delicate shapes, some striped with flame-like patterns. The air smells faintly of earth and blossoms, while fountains murmur in the background. Tulips had been cultivated in Central Asia for centuries, but under the Ottomans, they reached a new level of refinement. They became symbols of elegance, planted in gardens, celebrated in poetry, admired at feasts. Courtiers compared the shape of a tulip to the turban of a nobleman, its petals to the grace of a beloved. To give a tulip was to give not just beauty, but meaning. When tulip bulbs reached Europe, they sparked fascination. In the Netherlands especially, they became an obsession. Merchants traded bulbs as if they were jewels, their prices soaring, fortunes made and lost in the frenzy known later as tulip mania. Yet the flower's journey began here, in the calm gardens of Ottoman palaces, where they were admired not for speculation, but for beauty. There were other luxuries too. Carpets woven in Anatolia, their patterns intricate, their colors deep, carried across seas into European homes. Porcelain from China, imported through Ottoman trade, found places on Venetian tables. Spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, saffron, passed through Ottoman markets, their scent lingering in kitchens and feasts. Each object, each flavor, arrived shrouded in a sense of distance, of mystery, as if carrying whispers from lands unseen. Imagine walking through an Istanbul bazaar at dusk, the lamps flickering, the air heavy with the mingled smells of spice and smoke. A merchant unwraps a small bundle of tulip bulbs, their skins papery and brown, ordinary to the eye, yet prized beyond measure. Another offers tiny sacks of coffee beans, their surfaces glossy, their aroma rich. These are not treasures of gold or silver, but of habit and delight. Luxuries that change how people live, eat, and gather. Europeans who carried them home often spoke of them with wonder. Coffee, they said, sharpened the mind, quickened the pulse. Tulips, they said, carried a beauty more perfect than any rose. Carpets softened stone floors, spices transformed ordinary bread and meat into feasts. Slowly, these goods became markers of status, tokens of wealth, as important as coins or jewels. And yet, in their origins, they were simple. A seed planted in earth, a bean roasted over fire, a flower opening in spring. Their journey into luxury was not in their essence, but in the long paths they traveled, the hands that carried them, the meanings people gave them. As night settles over Istanbul, the coffee houses grow quiet. Lamps glow dimly, their smoke curling upward. In palace gardens, the tulips close their petals, their colors hidden in shadow. The markets lock their stalls, goods secured until morning. The luxuries of the Ottoman world rest in silence, awaiting another dawn, another gathering, another journey outward, to weave themselves into the fabric of distant lives. In the age of kings and emperors, of sultans and popes, there was another kind of power, quieter, less visible, yet deeply influential. It was the power of the Hanseatic League, a network of towns bound not by conquest, but by commerce. Its reach stretched across the cold waters of the Baltic and the North Sea, from London to Bergen, from Bruges to Novgorod. Imagine a map of Europe in the mid-1500s. Great empires are marked in bold colors, their borders thick with pride. Spain glows with the silver of the New World. The Ottoman Empire stretches across 3 continents. The Holy Roman Empire spreads in patchwork across Central Europe. And then, scattered like threads of gold, lie the cities of the Hansa, Lübeck, Hamburg, Danzig, Riga, Cologne, and dozens more. Individually, they seem small, but together, they form a web that binds seas and markets. Step into a Hanseatic contour, one of the League's trading outposts abroad. In London, it stands near the Thames, a walled compound where German merchants live and work. Inside, the air smells of tar and wool, of salted fish and ale. Ledgers are kept in Low German, the language of trade. Rules are strict. Merchants live communally, eat together, followed regulations that keep their unity strong. They are far from home, yet bound together by the League's order. In Novgorod, another contour thrives. Here, furs arrive in endless supply: sable, ermine, fox, their softness a marvel to those who touch them. The merchants trade salt, cloth, and metals in exchange, their influence reaching deep into Russia's forests. The air is colder, the days shorter, but the rhythm of trade remains steady. The mystery of the League lies in how such towns held sway over mighty kingdoms. Their strength was not in armies, though they sometimes fielded fleets to defend their roots. Their true power was economic. They controlled the salt that preserved fish, the grain that fed cities, the timber that built ships. They set terms of trade, dictated tariffs, and negotiated treaties as though they were a sovereign power. Kings who defied them risked shortages, higher prices, or even embargoes that could bring hunger to their subjects. Picture a council of Hanseatic delegates in Lübeck. Representatives from dozens of towns sit in a great hall, its walls high, its air filled with the smoke of torches. The men speak in measured tones, their words deliberate. They debate tariffs, discuss piracy on the Baltic, plan the defense of convoys. The sound is not of clashing swords, but of quills scratching across parchment, of voices steady and thoughtful. And yet, these decisions ripple outward, shaping the fortunes of entire regions. There is secrecy, too, in their influence. While monarchs parade their power with crowns and ceremonies, the Hanse moves quietly, behind walls of warehouses and in chambers of merchants. Agreements are sealed not with trumpets, but with signatures. Yet these signatures carry the weight of fleets, of goods stacked high in warehouses of the lifeblood of trade. For the common people of Europe, the Hans's presence was both ordinary and invisible. The fish on a peasant's table in Saxony, the salt in a barrel in Denmark, the wax candles burning in a church in Flanders, all flowed through Hanseatic routes. Few thought of the merchants in Lübeck or Hamburg, yet their choices shaped prices, availability, and survival itself. By evening, the harbor of a Hanseatic town grows still. Ships lie at anchor, their sails furled. Warehouses stand silent, their doors barred, their goods secured for the night. Yet even in the quiet, the league's power hums like the sea itself, steady, unseen, and constant. The Hanseatic League was not an empire of soldiers, but of agreements. Its mystery lay in its invisibility. It left no grand palaces, no monuments of stone, only the quiet rhythm of commerce and the prosperity of towns, bound together by trust. And though its influence has faded with time, the memory of its hidden strength lingers still, a reminder that wealth, carefully woven, can rule as surely as kings. It is early morning in Amsterdam, sometime in the late 1500s, when the city is rising to prominence as one of Europe's great centers of trade. The first light of dawn filters through a mist that hangs low over the canals. The water reflects the pale sky, broken only by the slow ripple of barges gliding silently between wooden quays. The air is cool and damp, filled with the mingled scents of brine, fresh-cut timber, and the faint sweetness of tarred rope. Seagulls wheel overhead, their cries sharp, while the deeper sound of church bells rolls across the city, marking the beginning of the day. You walk along a narrow canal lined with tall houses, their facades narrow but rising high, each crowned with a gabled roof. The houses lean slightly forward, their beams fitted with pulleys, so that goods may be hoisted directly into the lofts. The doors open onto counting rooms and warehouses, their interiors alive with the rhythm of trade. Step inside one of these warehouses. The air is thick with the smell of spices, pepper sharp and biting, cinnamon warm and sweet, cloves pungent and heavy. Barrels are stacked high, their iron hoops gleaming faintly in the dim light. Workers move steadily, rolling casks across the floor, lifting sacks of grain, weighing bundles of hides, the thud of boots, the scrape of wood, the muffled murmur of voices fills the space. In one corner, clerks sit at a long table, their quills scratching steadily across parchment. Ledgers lie open before them, columns of neat numbers recording shipments from Java, from the Baltic, from Spain. Their ink-stained fingers move quickly, dipping quills, shaking sand across the pages to dry the writing. The faint smell of ink and wax lingers in the air, blending with the sharper scents of trade goods. Step back outside, and the canals are busier now. Boats crowd the water, their hulls low in the water, heavy with cargo. A vessel arrives from the Baltic, its hold filled with grain, the smell of wheat and rye rising as hatches are opened. Another arrives from Portugal, carrying salt, its crystals shining pale in the morning light. Soon ships will return from distant seas, with cargoes of pepper, nutmeg, and silk, goods that carry with them the warmth of tropics and the mystery of faraway lands. At the markets, the air hums with voices. Merchants bargain in Dutch, French, German, Spanish. The sound is steady, low, deliberate, punctuated by the clink of coins and the scrape of scales. Stalls are piled high with fish, their scales still glistening, with wheels of cheese, their rinds golden, with bolts of cloth dyed deep colors. The smell is rich and varied. Smoked herring, fresh bread, spices sharp on the air. By midday, the city is alive with motion. Carters roll heavy wagons over cobbled streets, their iron rims clattering. Children dart through alleys, their laughter rising above the noise. Women carry baskets filled with bread and vegetables, the smell of fresh cabbage and turnips mingling with the smoke of hearth fires. Above it all, the steady creak of cranes lifting barrels into lofts punctuates the day's rhythm. Step into a tavern by the water. The room is low-ceilinged, dim, the air thick with pipe smoke. Sailors sit at wooden tables, mugs of ale in their hands, their voices rising in rough laughter. Merchants huddle in corners, their conversations quieter, the hands sketching figures on scraps of parchment. The floor smells of spilled beer, the air of roasted meat. Outside, the water laps softly against the quay, the faint sound of rigging tapping against masts. As evening comes, the canals glow with lantern light. Their reflections shimmer in the water, broken by the slow passage of barges returning to moorings. The air cools, carrying the scent of damp stone and wood. Shops close their shutters. The streets grow quieter, and the voices of merchants fade into the stillness. Amsterdam at night is calm, its wealth resting in the silent warehouses, in the dark holds of ships, in the careful lines of ledgers waiting for another day. The city's fortune is not in sudden spectacle, but in steady rhythm. Goods arriving, being measured, stored, and sold. The hum of commerce is as constant as the tide, as enduring as the flow of the canals themselves. To walk here is to feel the balance of a city built on water, where wealth does not glitter in jewels, but settles quietly in barrels of spice, sacks of grain, and the silent assurance of trade. Long before South Africa or Brazil became famous for their diamonds, the world's supply of these precious stones came almost entirely from India. In the 16th century, the Mughal Empire sat at the center of this glittering trade. To hold a diamond from India was to hold not only beauty, but mystery, a fragment of the earth shaped into light. Imagine the mines of Golconda in the Deccan. The sun beats down on dusty hills, their surfaces scarred by pits and trenches dug by countless hands. The air is hot, filled with the smell of earth and sweat. Workers bend low, sifting through gravel and clay. Their baskets are filled with stones, most dull and ordinary. Yet sometimes one gleams faintly, catching the light with a sparkle that sets it apart. The process is slow, almost ritualistic. Stones are washed in shallow pans of water, the liquid shimmering in the sun as hands move steadily through the grit. The sound is soft, the splash of water, the scrape of stones, the murmur of voices. Then suddenly, a cry. A worker holds up a small translucent gem, its surface rough, but glowing faintly in the light. It is passed carefully to an overseer, placed in a pouch, recorded in a ledger. A fragment of wealth, born from the earth, begins its journey. From the mines, diamonds travel to markets. Picture a stall in the bustling bazaars of Hyderabad. Merchants sit cross-legged on carpets, trays of gems before them. Some are small, faintly tinted, others larger, clearer, their facets rough but promising. Buyers lean close, peering at the stones in the lamplight. The air smells of incense and dust, the murmur of bargaining steady and low. Coins pass from hand to hand. Contracts are sealed with nods and quiet words. The finest stones, however, are destined for the Mughal court. Imagine a jeweler's workshop in Agra. The room is small, lit by narrow windows. On the workbench lie tools of delicate precision, tiny hammers, chisels, files. The air smells of oil and metal. A diamond lies before the artisan, uncut, its surface cloudy and uneven. With patient hands, he begins to shape it, striking carefully, shaving facets, polishing until the stone gleams. Slowly, it becomes not just a fragment of earth, but a jewel fit for a crown. In Akbar's treasury, such diamonds are gathered. They lie in velvet-lined caskets, their surfaces shimmering in lamplight. Some are set into daggers, their hilts flashing with fire. Others adorn turbans, rings, and necklaces. To wear a diamond is not only to show wealth, but to carry a symbol of permanence, of light drawn from the depths of the earth. And yet, the allure of diamonds lies not only in their beauty, but in the stories they carry. Some are said to bring luck, others misfortune. Legends grow around them, tales of cursed gems, of fortunes made and lost, of stones that change the fate of dynasties. The great Koh-i-Noor, the mountain of light, passed through Mughal hands, its brilliance celebrated, its fate entwined with empires. Imagine standing in a Mughal audience hall as a noble enters, his turban adorned with a diamond that catches the sun. The stone sparkles, casting tiny flashes of light across the room. Murmurs rise among courtiers. The jewel is not merely decoration, it is a statement, a symbol of rank, of favor, of nearness to imperial power. For ordinary people, the diamonds of India are distant, almost mythical. Farmers in the fields, artisans in their workshops, soldiers in the ranks may never see such a stone. Yet they know of them, whispered in tales, glimpsed in festivals, sung of in poetry. Diamonds are not just objects of wealth, they are threads of imagination, shining points in the fabric of culture. As night falls over the mines of Golconda, the air cools, the dust settles. Workers rest, their baskets empty for the day. The earth lies quiet, its treasures hidden once more beneath layers of stone. In distant palaces, diamonds glimmer in lamplight, set into gold, admired in silence. Their journey from dust to brilliance remains a mystery, slow, uncertain, yet always captivating. To hold such a stone is to hold not only wealth, but wonder. A fragment of the earth transformed into eternal light, carrying with it the allure of distant lands and the stories of empires. Wealth in Akbar's empire was not a static hoard of jewels locked in chests. It was a living system, flowing steadily through fields, markets, and workshops, gathered carefully into the treasury before returning outward again to support armies, palaces, and the great machinery of governance. Imagine stepping into the Mughal treasury at Fatehpur Sikri. The chamber is high-ceilinged, its walls thick, its air cool even in the heat of the Indian plain. Lamps flicker in iron holders, their flames glinting faintly on rows of chests lined against the walls. Each chest is bound with iron, its lock heavy, its wood dark with age. Inside, coins lie stacked. Silver rupees, gold mohurs, copper dams, their surfaces worn smooth from countless hands. The faint metallic scent lingers in the air, mingled with wax and oil. Clerks sit at long wooden tables, their quills scratching steadily across parchment and palm leaf. Ledgers lie open, filled with neat Persian script. Each entry records a transaction. Taxes collected from distant provinces, tribute sent from defeated rulers, customs levied on caravans crossing mountain passes. The rhythm of the quills is constant, as steady as the ticking of a clock. Akbar's treasury is vast, but it is not chaotic. His genius lay not only in conquest, but in administration. He reorganized the empire's revenue system, shifting it from arbitrary exactions to a more rational and stable form. Fields were surveyed, crops assessed, and taxes calculated based on expected yields. For peasants, this meant predictability. They knew what was owed, and in return, the empire's protection and order allowed markets to thrive. Imagine a farmer in the Ganges plain. He tills the earth with wooden plows, the soil rich and dark beneath the monsoon rains. At harvest, grain is gathered, weighed, and a portion set aside for imperial revenue. Officials record the amounts, sealing them into sacks that will be transported to the nearest treasury depot. The rhythm is seasonal, tied to the earth, yet it connects directly to the glittering halls of the Mughal court. Trade, too, fills Akbar's coffers. Caravans arrive from Persia, carrying carpets and horses, from Central Asia, bringing furs and precious stones, from Bengal, with silks and rice, from Gujarat, with spices and salt. Merchants unload their goods at bustling markets, where customs officers carefully weigh and levy dues. The air smells of pepper and indigo, of leather and grain. Each transaction adds a trickle to the treasury's flow. In the ports of Surat and Cambay, ships from the Arabian Sea unload yet more wealth. The sound of waves mixes with the cries of dock workers and the calls of merchants. Chests of goods are tallied, their duties noted in ledgers before they vanish into the networks of inland trade. The Mughal Empire is not only an agricultural giant, but a commercial one, and its revenues reflect the endless movement of goods across its borders. Akbar himself takes keen interest in these mechanisms. In council, he listens to ministers explain figures, their voices steady, their hands pointing to tallied columns. He asks questions, precise and calm, about harvests in Bengal, revenues in Punjab, tariffs in Gujarat. His eyes scan the documents, his mind weighing not only numbers, but the well-being of his people. For him, wealth is not only a measure of coin, but of stability and justice. Still, the treasury is not idle. From its chests, coins flow outward again. They pay soldiers in the vast Mughal armies, cavalrymen in armor, archers with bows, musketeers with matchlocks. They build palaces and mosques, their domes rising against the sky, their walls gleaming with marble inlay. They support artists, poets, scholars, and musicians whose works enrich the empire's culture. They provide grain in times of famine, loans in times of crisis, alms for the poor who gather at the palace gates. To walk through Akbar's treasury is to feel both abundance and order. The air is quiet, save for the scratch of quills and the soft clink of coins being weighed. The light is dim, steady, casting shadows across the ledgers and chests. Wealth is present, immense, but it feels less like glittering display and more like a reservoir, calm, deep, and carefully managed. As night falls, the clerks close their ledgers, sand still clinging to the fresh ink. The chests are locked, seals are fixed, guards posted at the doors. The room grows still, the faint scent of metal lingering in the cool air. The wealth of an empire rests quietly in the darkness, waiting for another dawn. And with it rests the assurance that Akbar's fortune is not in chance or conquest alone, but in the steady, measured flow of coin. From the furrows of fields, the stalls of bazaars, the holds of ships, all gathered, counted, and returned again in the great cycle of empire. It is dawn in Fatehpur Sikri, the imperial city of the Mughal court under Akbar the Great. The rising sun spills golden light across red sandstone walls, catching the carved lattice screens and gleaming on the domes that crown palaces and mosques. The air is cool, tinged with the scent of damp earth, roses from the gardens, and smoke from morning fires. Within the palace complex, the court begins to stir. Courtiers in silken robes move quietly along shaded corridors. Elephants in the courtyards are draped in embroidered cloths, their tusks tipped with gleaming brass, their handlers whispering commands in soft voices. The sound of their slow steps echoes like drums against the stone. Step into the Diwani cars, the hall of private audience. The chamber is vast, its pillars carved with delicate patterns, its floors inlaid with polished stone that cools beneath bare feet. At the center rises a grand platform connected to the surrounding gallery by stone walkways, a throne for a ruler who sought to be at the heart of his empire. The air is heavy with incense, sweet and resinous, curling upward in faint trails of smoke. Akbar himself appears, dressed not in overwhelming splendor, but in dignified grace. His robe is of fine cotton, soft and light, dyed in deep colors. Around his waist is a sash embroidered with gold thread. At his side, a jewel-studded dagger. His turban gleams faintly, set with a single gem that catches the morning light. His face is calm, his eyes steady, his bearing one of authority tempered by reflection. Around him gather nobles, scholars, generals, and envoys from distant lands. They bow, their garments a tapestry of colors, Persian silks in rich blues, Rajput cloaks of crimson and gold, Central Asian robes trimmed with fur. The air hums with languages, Persian, Hindi, Arabic, Turkish, blending together like the threads of a great fabric. A courtier steps forward, presenting gifts. A necklace of pearls, their surfaces smooth and luminous. A carved ivory box from Bengal, gleaming pale in the light. A tree of emeralds and rubies, each stone glimmering with deep fire. Akbar accepts them with measured calm, for jewels and treasures flow constantly to his court, symbols of loyalty and tribute rather than objects of personal indulgence. Outside, the palace gardens unfold in symmetry. Water channels reflect the sky, their surfaces broken by the ripple of fountains. Birds sing among orange trees, their blossoms filling the air with sweetness. Peacocks stroll across the grass, their feathers shimmering like jewels come to life. The sound of flutes drifts faintly, played by musicians seated in shaded pavilions. In the royal stables, horses from Arabia and Central Asia stamp their hooves, their coats brushed to a shining gloss. The smell of hay and leather mixes with the musk of animals. Elephants are fed sugarcane and melons, their trunks curling with slow grace, their eyes calm and intelligent. Each creature is both a symbol of power and a companion in ceremony. At midday, the court assembles for a public audience in the Diwaniyam, the Hall of the People. Citizens gather in the open courtyard, their voices low, their faces turned toward the ruler. Akbar listens as petitions are read aloud, disputes over land, requests for justice, pleas for mercy. His answers are calm, deliberate, his tone steady, as though each decision were a stone laid in the foundation of his empire. The rhythm of the court continues into evening. In the halls, lamps are lit, their flames flickering softly against painted walls. Dishes are set out, rice fragrant with saffron, meats spiced with cardamom and cloves, flatbreads warm from the oven, fruits piled high in gleaming bowls. The air grows heavy with aroma, rich yet balanced. Courtiers dine in measured order, their voices blending with the soft pluck of strings and the low beat of drums. As night settles, the stars shimmer above the sandstone domes. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the gardens. Musicians play softly, their melodies winding like gentle rivers through the courtyards. In the quiet, the empire seems at rest, its vastness gathered into the stillness of the palace. To walk through Akbar's court is to walk through a world of balance. Wealth not flaunted recklessly, but shaped into harmony, elephants draped in silk, jewels placed as symbols, palaces built not for excess but for order. It is grandeur tempered by dignity, splendor softened into calm. And in that calm, you feel the steady heart of empire beating softly beneath the stars. By the end of the 16th century, Amsterdam was no longer only a bustling port. It was becoming the heart of something new, a way of organizing wealth and risk that would change the course of global trade. This was the birth of the Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie, the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, often called the world's first true corporation. Imagine a chamber in Amsterdam in 1602. The room is plain, its walls wood-paneled, its windows narrow. At a long table sit merchants, their faces calm and deliberate. Each wears simple but well-cut woolen clothing, sober in color, their collars stiff with starch. Before them lie ledgers, quills, and heavy wax seals. The air smells of ink and oil lamps, faint smoke curling from their flames. They speak of voyages, long and dangerous journeys around the Cape of Good Hope to the fabled Spice Islands. Ships leave Holland filled with woolen cloth, cheese and silver, and return if fortune holds, with nutmeg, cloves, pepper, and cinnamon. The profits are immense, but so are the risks. Storms, pirates, disease, and war with rival powers mean that many voyages never return. Until now, individual merchants or small partnerships have borne these risks alone, staking fortunes on a single fleet. But here, in this chamber, they propose something different: to pool their resources, to share both risk and profit, to create a company that belongs to many rather than a few. Each investor will buy shares and in return receive dividends from the voyages. Losses too will be shared, softened by the breadth of collective fortune. This idea is revolutionary. For the first time, wealth is not tied only to land or to the risk of one man's gamble. It becomes a paper share, a small piece of a larger whole, capable of being bought, sold, and passed on. To hold a share is to hold a fragment of the faraway world, a right to profit from spices harvested in distant islands, carried across oceans, and sold in European markets. Step into the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, established soon after. The building hums with voices, the air filled with the faint smell of parchment, sweat, and damp wool. Merchants gather in clusters, their voices low, their gestures small. Shares are bought and sold, with nods, with murmured agreements, with figures scrawled quickly in ledgers. The exchange is calm, almost quiet, but beneath the surface flows the restless energy of speculation, of wealth made liquid and mobile. Meanwhile, the VOC dispatches fleets larger and better armed than any private venture before. Imagine the harbor as a fleet departs. Great ships with high sterns and broad sails, their decks lined with cannon, their flags snapping in the wind. Crowds gather on the quays to watch, voices rising in farewell. The smell of tar and seawater mingles with the cries of gulls as the ships turn slowly toward open sea. Months will pass before news returns, and with it, profit or loss. For the merchants, the company is both shield and sword. It reduces risk at home while projecting power abroad. The VOC is granted a charter by the Dutch government, giving it rights once reserved for kings. The authority to wage war, to sign treaties, to govern colonies in distant lands. It is a company, yet also an empire, blending commerce with sovereignty. At home, investors wait patiently. Dividends arrive in the form of silver coins, stacked carefully on tables, their weight reassuring. Others are paid in goods, pepper, nutmeg, cloves, which can be sold in Amsterdam's markets for handsome profit. The returns are steady and confidence grows. Soon, thousands hold shares, from wealthy merchants to widows with small inheritances. For the first time, ordinary people can tie their fortunes to distant seas. The system spreads slowly beyond Amsterdam. Other nations watch with envy and unease. The English follow with their own East India Company. The French later attempt the same. But it is the Dutch who first give shape to the modern corporation, the pooling of wealth, the spreading of risk, the binding of distant oceans into the ledgers of investors at home. As evening settles over Amsterdam, the stock exchange grows quiet. The merchants depart, their ledgers closed, their seals cooling on hardened wax. Outside, the canals shimmer in lantern light. The warehouses rest heavy with goods, and the ships in harbor creak softly as they wait for the tide. The VOC is still new, its story just beginning, but already it represents something profound. The transformation of trade from perilous voyages into an enduring system, where wealth is no longer carried only in barrels of spice, but in the quiet assurance of paper shares and steady dividends. And in this calm, deliberate creation, the future of global commerce takes shape. It is a misty morning on the River Thames in late 16th century London. The water lies grey and sluggish beneath the pale sky, its surface broken by the slow movement of barges and the tall masts of ships rocking gently at anchor. The air is cool and damp, filled with the mingled scents of river mud, tar, and smoke from countless hearths rising above the city. Along the wharves, the day begins early. Dock workers move with steady rhythm, their boots thudding against damp planks. The creak of ropes and the groan of pulleys echo across the water. Crates are hauled from ship to shore, barrels rolled along the docks, sacks of wool stacked in neat piles. The sounds of labor mingle with the cries of gulls circling above, their sharp calls carrying over the noise of the river. Step closer, and the docks reveal their variety. Ships arrive from across the North Sea, their holds heavy with timber and fish. Others return from the Iberian Peninsula, carrying wine, oil, and salt. A few, bold and rare, arrive from voyages further still, their cargoes including spices, sugar, or the strange new leaf called tobacco, its scent sharp and unfamiliar as it drifts from open barrels. The market stalls nearby are crowded. Merchants spread their goods across rough wooden tables. Bolts of cloth, dyed in bright colors, baskets of onions and turnips still clinging with soil. Trays of fish silver in the morning light. The air is rich with smells. Fresh bread baking in nearby ovens. Smoke from roasting meat. The tang of herbs and spices sold in small pouches. Voices rise in a constant murmur. Sellers calling out prices, buyers bargaining, children weaving between stalls with baskets in hand. Walk further into the city, and the streets grow narrower, the houses taller, their upper stories leaning toward one another, as though whispering secrets across the lanes. The cobblestones are uneven, damp with last night's rain. Water trickles in gutters, carrying straw, ashes, and refuse down toward the river. Yet despite the grime, the city hums with life. Shop signs creak above doorways, a painted boot for a cobbler, a mortar and pestle for an apothecary, a loaf of bread for a baker. Each door opens into a small world of craft and commerce. Step into a tavern near the river. The air is dim and smoky, lit by flickering tallow candles. Sailors sit at rough wooden tables, mugs of ale in hand, their voices loud with laughter and stories of the sea. The smell of spilled beer and roasting mutton fills the room. Merchants sit apart in quieter corners, their heads bent together, their voices low, speaking of prices, risks, and opportunities abroad. Outside, apprentices hurry through the streets, carrying bundles of cloth or baskets of goods. Carters shout as they urge horses forward, their wagons piled high with grain or wool. The rattle of iron-rimmed wheels mixes with the distant toll of church bells, calling out the hours. Above it all, the spire of St. Paul's Cathedral rises, its great bell echoing across the city, a steady heartbeat of time. By midday, the bustle reaches its height. The river is thick with boats, the markets crowded with voices. The city is alive with the smell of smoke, salt, and food cooking on countless hearths. Yet beneath the noise lies a sense of ambition. London is not only a city of trade, it is a city reaching outward. Its merchants dreaming of voyages across oceans, of wealth from distant lands. As evening falls, the river begins to quiet. Ships rock gently at anchor, their sails furled, their decks empty, save for guards keeping watch. The markets close, their stalls covered, their goods locked away. Taverns glow with warm light, their doors spilling laughter into the streets. The air grows cool, carrying the faint scent of damp stone and smoke. London at night is calmer, yet the hum of ambition does not fade. In the counting houses, merchants still pore over ledgers by candlelight, their quills scratching steadily. They think of the next voyage, the next cargo, the next opportunity. For in this city, wealth is not measured only by what has been earned, but by what might yet be gained across seas not yet sailed. To walk along the Thames at night is to feel both rest and restlessness. The calm of the river, the quiet of ships at anchor, and the silent dreams of a city preparing to launch itself into the wider world. In the 16th and 17th centuries, wealth was not always gold or silver, nor jewels or land. Sometimes it was something far smaller. A nut the size of a marble, a dried bud, a pinch of powder. Spices were the hidden treasure of the age, more valuable than silver by weight, more desired than silk or porcelain. And at the center of this trade, the Dutch built their empire. Imagine a spice warehouse in Amsterdam. The building is tall, its windows narrow, its doors thick with iron hinges. Inside, the air is thick and heavy with scent. The sharp bite of pepper fills your nose, dry and pungent. Cinnamon lingers sweet and warm, its curled sticks stacked in neat bundles. Nutmeg and cloves lie in crates, their fragrance almost intoxicating, filling the air with a richness that clings to the skin and clothes. Workers move slowly, coughing softly, as they lift sacks and roll barrels, their boots crunching on spilled grains of spice scattered across the floor. Each of these goods has traveled halfway around the world. Pepper from Java, cloves from the Moluccas, cinnamon from Ceylon, nutmeg from Banda. To Europeans, these goods are still exotic, their origins distant and almost mythical. They arrive by ship, carried in dark holds across stormy seas. guarded by cannon and contracts alike. The Dutch, through the VOC, sought not only to trade these goods, but to control them entirely. They negotiated, coerced, and at times fought to secure exclusive rights. In the Spice Islands, they built fortresses, their walls thick with stone, their cannon pointed towards sea and land alike. Local rulers were drawn into agreements, some willing, others reluctant, that bound their harvests to Dutch buyers. The aim was simple: to ensure that no other merchants, Portuguese, English, or local, could carry these treasures away. Picture a Dutch official standing in a humid harbor in the East Indies. The air is heavy, with the smell of cloves drying in the sun, their dark buds spread on mats, their scent rising into the heat. Ships lie at anchor nearby, their sails furled, their hulls heavy with supplies. The official inspects the harvest, his ledger open, his quill scratching numbers that record not only profit but power. The cloves will travel to Amsterdam, where their value will multiply tenfold. Back in Europe, spices are more than flavor. They are symbols of wealth. A small jar of nutmeg sits on the table of a wealthy burgher, its surface carved from glass, its contents measured out sparingly. A pinch is added to wine, to meat, to sweets, transforming ordinary dishes into luxuries. Cinnamon perfumes the air at feasts, its sweetness mingling with roasted meats and honey. Pepper, once rare, becomes the most common spice, sprinkled liberally on food in households that can afford it. Each grain carries with it the memory of distant islands and long voyages. Yet the mystery lies not only in the goods, but in the empire itself. An empire without crowns or coronations, built quietly through contracts, monopolies, and warehouses. The Dutch do not rule with kingship, but with ledgers. Their forts are not palaces, but warehouses. Their treasures, not crowns, but sacks of spice. Their power is not announced with trumpets, but measured in profit margins and market control. And for all its reach, this empire is strangely invisible. To a farmer in Flanders, a housewife in Hamburg, or a baker in Paris, the Dutch presence is tasted rather than seen. It lingers in the warmth of cinnamon in bread, in the bite of pepper on a stew, in the faint sweetness of nutmeg in milk. The goods of distant islands become part of daily life, even as their origins remain hidden in mystery. As night falls in Amsterdam, the spice warehouses grow still. Their shutters are closed, their locks fastened, guards pacing slowly in the quiet streets. Yet inside, the air remains heavy, the mingled scents lingering in the dark. Each barrel, each sack, holds not only fragrance and flavor, but the fortune of a city, the secret empire of a company. The Dutch did not always display their wealth in jewels or lavish courts. Their empire was quieter, almost secretive, built on scents, flavors, and the patient control of trade. And in that quietness lay its strength, a power carried not in crowns, but in cloves. By the late 1500s, England was a kingdom still finding its place among the great powers of Europe. Spain drew silver from the New World. The Dutch organized their fleets into powerful companies. The Ottomans ruled trade across 3 continents. Yet in London, a new idea began to take shape. A way for England's merchants and adventurers to share both the risks and the rewards of distant voyages. This was the Joint Stock Company. Imagine a chamber in the heart of London, its walls paneled with dark oak, the air smelling faintly of tallow candles and damp wool. A group of merchants gathers around a long table. Each carries a ledger. Each wears the sober clothing of the city's middling elite. Black woolen cloaks, white ruffs, sturdy boots. On the table lie quills, parchment contracts, and piles of coins, gold sovereigns, silver shillings, copper pennies. They speak of voyages across the Atlantic to Virginia, around Africa to the East Indies, northward in search of a passage to China. Each route carries the promise of riches, tobacco, sugar, timber, spices, but also danger. Ships might vanish in storms, or fall prey to pirates, or return empty-handed. For one man to risk his fortune on such a voyage is perilous. But if many men contribute smaller shares, the burden is lighter, the chance of gain more certain. And so, the joint stock company is born. Each investor buys a share, recorded carefully in the ledger. In return, he receives a right to a portion of the profit. The company, rather than any single man, owns the ships, hires the crews, and negotiates with rulers abroad. Risk is spread, profit is pooled, and ambition grows. The Virginia Company, chartered in 1606, dreams of colonies across the Atlantic. Imagine one of its meetings. The air hums with cautious excitement. A secretary reads aloud the terms of the Royal Charter, granting the company rights to settle and govern lands in the New World. Maps are unrolled, their coasts sketched faintly in ink, dotted with names that shift with each expedition. Investors lean forward, their hands resting on the table, their eyes filled with possibility. Across the ocean, tobacco waits to be planted, timber waits to be harvested, rivers wait to be mapped. The East India Company, founded earlier in 1600, sets its sights on spices and silks. Picture a fleet preparing to depart from the Thames. The ships are small compared to those of Spain or Portugal, their hulls tarred black, their sails patched but sturdy. Crates of woolen cloth are loaded aboard, along with barrels of salted meat and casks of beer. Sailors scramble over rigging, their voices sharp against the creak of wood. On the dock, merchants watch solemnly, their fortunes tied to these fragile vessels. The tide pulls them outward, into the grey water of the Channel, toward the long and uncertain seas. For the sailors themselves, life aboard is harsh. The air below deck smells of tar, damp wood, and salted fish. The hammocks sway with the rhythm of the waves. The boards creak endlessly, and the food grows stale as weeks turn into months. Yet the promise of pay, and perhaps a share of profit, keeps them steady. Each wave carries them further into mystery, into lands described in rumor and dream. At home, the investors wait. Their ledgers are marked, their dividends uncertain until news returns. A single ship arriving with spice can yield immense wealth. A single storm can erase an entire year's hopes. The risk is constant, but the system endures. England, once on the margins of global trade, begins to weave itself into its fabric. By candlelight, in counting houses and guild halls, the rhythm continues. Quills scratch across parchment, coins clink as they are counted. Contracts are sealed with hot wax. The system is calm, deliberate, and yet beneath its surface lies restless ambition. England is preparing, slowly but steadily, to extend itself outward, not only through soldiers and sailors, but through companies, joint ventures of merchants whose fortunes depend on seas they may never see. As evening falls in London, the city quiets. The Thames flows dark beneath the bridges, its surface glimmering faintly in the moonlight. In the counting rooms, the ledgers are closed, the coins locked away, the candles snuffed. Yet the dreams remain, of colonies across the ocean, of spices from distant ports, of wealth gathered not in sudden bursts, but in steady ventures, carefully measured and shared. The joint stock company is more than a business. It is a doorway. A way for England's ambition to cross seas, to take root in foreign soil, to build fortunes in places still scarcely known. And in the calm of night, those ambitions rest quietly, waiting for the next tide. Across the Atlantic, in the early years of the 17th century, England's ambition begins to take physical form. Ships that left London's grey waters now return with reports of strange lands, of soil both fertile and stubborn, of crops that might yet bind the old world and the new in an uneasy partnership of labor and desire. Among these, two crops stand out: tobacco and sugar. Imagine the colony of Jamestown in Virginia. The year is young, the morning mist rising from the James River, its surface glimmering faintly in the pale light. The fort is small, its wooden palisade rough and weathered, its cabins smoky from damp fires. The air smells of earth, resin, and ash. Life here is fragile. Supplies from England are uncertain, the soil unfamiliar, and disease lingers in the marshy air. Yet, in the clearings beyond the fort, settlers bend low over rows of plants. Broad leaves stretch toward the sun, their surfaces sticky with resin. The air is filled with their sharp, bitter scent. Tobacco. The crop grows slowly, demanding careful tending. Yet when cured and dried, its leaves carry immense value across the ocean. Picture barrels of cured tobacco leaves stacked along the docks in Virginia, their smell pungent and strong, clinging to the wood, the air heavy with its sharpness. These barrels are loaded onto ships, their holds already cramped with supplies and men. Across the Atlantic, they fetch high prices, for in England, tobacco has become a novelty, a luxury, a habit spreading quickly among nobles and commoners alike. Pipes are carved, smoke rises in taverns, and the bitter leaf, once unknown, becomes an everyday indulgence. Further south, in the islands of the Caribbean, another crop takes root: sugarcane. Imagine a plantation at dawn. The fields stretch wide, the stalks tall and green, their blades cutting sharply against the skin. The air is heavy with heat and humidity, even in the morning. Workers move through the rows with slow rhythm, cutting cane with long knives, stacking the stalks in bundles. The scent is sweet and grassy, filling the air as the juice seeps from the freshly cut cane. Nearby, the sugar mill groans with labor. Wooden rollers crush the cane, the juice flowing into troughs. Fires roar in iron cauldrons, boiling the liquid into crystals of pale gold. The air inside the mill is thick with heat, smoke, and sweetness, clinging to the skin, overwhelming in its intensity. Sugar, once a rare luxury sold by the ounce, now begins to flow in greater quantities, sweetening the tables of Europe, becoming not just a treat, but a staple of wealth. For England, these crops promise fortune, but also uncertainty. The colonies are fragile. Jamestown suffers hunger, disease, and conflict. Sugar plantations face storms, shortages, and labor that grows ever more demanding. The profits are immense, but so too are the risks. Ships may be lost at sea, fields destroyed by blight, markets shifted by the arrival of rival powers. In London, however, these risks are distant. Merchants count barrels, tally profits, and sip sweetened tea, as if the hardships of distant fields are but lines in a ledger. Tobacco smoke drifts through taverns, its sharpness mingling with the smell of ale. Sugar is sprinkled over fruit, stirred into wine, baked into cakes. Each grain, each leaf, carries with it the weight of oceans and the labor of colonies still uncertain in their survival. The mystery lies in how quickly these goods transform daily life. Within a generation, they shift from exotic curiosities to necessities. Pipes rest by every hearth. Sweet cakes appear on every table of the wealthy, and the cravings of Europe grow insatiable. The colonies, still fragile and small, are bound ever tighter to the fate of those cravings. As night falls in Virginia, the fields of tobacco lie quiet, their leaves broad and dark in the fading light. The river laps softly against the shore, its surface reflecting the moon. In the Caribbean, the sugar fields shimmer faintly, their stalks whispering in the wind. The mills grow silent, the fires dim, the sweetness lingering in the humid air. In London, across the sea, warehouses filled with barrels of tobacco and crates of sugar. Their scents mingle faintly even here, drifting across markets and quays. To those who purchase them, they are luxuries. To those who grow them, they are survival. And to England itself, they are the uncertain foundation of empire. Crops fragile in their growth, immense in their promise, mysterious in how swiftly they reshape the desires of the world. High in the thin air of the Andes stands a mountain unlike any other. Cerro Rico, the rich hill, looms above the town of Potosi. Its slopes are rugged and scarred, its summit often capped with snow, its flanks lined with the traces of countless tunnels and shafts. To look at it is to see both grandeur and exhaustion. A mountain that has given more silver than perhaps any other place on earth. It is dawn, and the air is thin, cold, and sharp. Your breath hangs in the air like smoke, vanishing quickly in the dry wind. The streets of Potosi stir as men prepare to climb toward the mines. Their clothing is rough wool, their faces lined, their hands calloused from labor. The sound of footsteps echoes against the cobbled lanes, mingling with the faint toll of church bells calling out the hour. As you walk toward the mountain, the scent of smoke and metal grows stronger. Smelters burn constantly, their chimneys sending dark plumes into the sky. The air tastes faintly of ash, acrid and heavy, clinking to the tongue. Piles of ore lie beside the furnaces, their surfaces dull gray, waiting to be transformed into shining bars of silver. The crackle of fire and the hiss of molten metal form the rhythm of the town. Step into a mine shaft. The light dims quickly, the walls damp and narrow. The air is close, heavy with dust. Wooden beams creak as they support the ceiling, and water drips steadily into shallow pools. Miners work with slow, deliberate motions, striking stone with iron tools, their breaths labored in the thin air. The sound of hammer on rock is steady, echoing through the dark passages. A small lamp flickers, its flame faint against the surrounding blackness. Its smell is sharp, a mix of smoke and oil. The miners move carefully, filling baskets with ore, lifting them to the surface where others wait to carry them away. Outside again, the sun feels blinding after the darkness, the cold air almost clean compared to the dust of the tunnels. In the town itself, the rhythm of silver shapes every life. Merchant stalls line the marketplace, their tables filled with goods brought from far away. Woolen cloth from Spain, wine from Portugal, tools and trinkets from across the Atlantic. The scent of roasted maize mingles with the sharper tang of alcohol distilled from sugarcane. Coins clink in purses, contracts are signed, goods are exchanged. Potosi is no longer only a mining town. It has become one of the largest, richest cities in the world. And yet, beneath the bustle lies fragility. The mountain gives, but at immense cost. The labor is unending, the dangers constant. Avalanches, collapses, and the invisible threat of mercury used in refining haunt the lives of miners. Each coin that leaves Potosi carries with it the weight of countless unseen struggles. At the mint, the silver is transformed. Step inside the Casa de la Moneda, the great mint of Potosi. The building is vast, its halls echoing with the sound of hammers striking metal. Wooden presses creak, dice stamp designs into coins. Sparks fly from heated silver. The air is metallic, sharp, filled with the scent of scorched metal and oil. Coins spill into baskets, their surfaces gleaming, their edges sharp. Each one bears the mark of empire, ready to cross oceans, to flow into markets from Seville to Manila. By evening, the mountain glows faintly red in the setting sun. Smoke continues to rise from chimneys, the smell of ash drifting across the town. In the streets, voices grow softer. Taverns fill with quiet laughter, the sound of pipes and drums drifting faintly through the cool air. The miners rest, their bodies weary, their hands still stained with dust. Above them, Cerro Rico looms in silence, its slopes scarred but still vast, its heart still filled with veins of silver. The mountain seems both eternal and exhausted, both giver and destroyer. In the quiet of night, Potosi rests. The fires burn low, the streets empty, the stars blaze bright in the thin air. Yet even in sleep, the rhythm of silver continues. The mountain waits, its wealth flowing slowly outward, shaping not only the town, but the fortunes of empires and the course of the world. The mountain of Potosi was only the beginning. The silver torn from its veins did not rest in the Andes. It moved, slowly at first, carried by mule trains along dusty paths, then faster, gathered into fleets that crossed oceans, and finally farther still, reaching markets in Asia, where it transformed into silk, porcelain, and spices. It was a journey that tied the world together, the first great current of global wealth. Imagine the silver leaving Potosi. Bars and coins are loaded onto the backs of llamas and mules. The animals climb narrow mountain paths, their hooves clattering on stones, their breath rising in pale clouds in the cold air. The drivers call softly, urging them forward, their voices blending with the wind. Each step carries the silver downward, away from the high, thin air of the Andes, toward the warmer valleys below. The path stretches long, winding across rugged landscapes. Days pass, the rhythm steady, the creak of leather straps, the scrape of hooves, the faint jingle of coins shifting in their sacks. At night, the caravans rest in small villages, the animals tethered, the silver guarded closely. Fires crackle, sending sparks upward into the dark sky, the smell of smoke mingling with the cold scent of mountain air. Eventually, the caravans reach the coast. At the great port of Lima, or at smaller harbors along the Pacific, the silver is gathered into warehouses. The air smells of salt and tar, the cries of gulls sharp above the crash of waves. Ships wait at anchor, their sails furled, their decks piled with barrels and chests. The silver is loaded carefully, each chest lowered into the hold, the space filling with the metallic scent of treasure. From here, two great routes diverge. Some silver is carried north to Panama, then hauled across the narrow isthmus, where the air grows thick with jungle heat and the cries of parrots echo from the trees. On the Atlantic coast, it is loaded again onto ships bound for Havana, then across the wide ocean to Seville. Other silver sails westward across the Pacific itself. Great galleons leave the port of Acapulco, their hulls heavy, their decks lined with cannon. The journey is long, months across empty seas, the air aboard filled with the smell of tar, salt, and damp wool. At last, they reach Manila in the Philippines. Here, silver pours into markets filled with Chinese merchants who accept it eagerly in exchange for silk, porcelain, and tea. Back in Spain, the silver fleets arrive in Seville. Imagine the city in the 16th century, its riverfront crowded with ships, its streets bustling with merchants. Warehouses groan under the weight of silver bars, their surfaces gleaming faintly in lamplight. Coins spill into purses, contracts are signed, debts repaid. The air is filled with the clink of money, the rustle of parchment, the low murmur of bargaining voices. The silver does not remain in Spain. It flows outward through bankers in Genoa, merchants in Antwerp, financiers in London. It pays for wars, for palaces, for armies marching across Europe. Yet just as swiftly, it flows east again toward Asia, where it is valued more highly than anywhere else. In China, silver is essential. It replaces paper money, becomes the foundation of taxes, the measure of wealth itself. To hold Spanish silver in Beijing or Canton is to hold stability, to exchange it for silk, porcelain, and goods that Europeans crave. Picture a marketplace in Manila. The air is warm, filled with the scent of spices and smoke. Merchants spread their goods across mats, bolts of silk, smooth as water, porcelain bowls gleaming white and blue, lacquered boxes shining with deep red. Spanish silver coins change hands, their surfaces worn from travel, but still gleaming in the sun. The murmur of voices rises, a chorus of Spanish, Tagalog, and Chinese, blending in the humid air. This flow of silver, from mountain to mule, from mule to ship, from ship to markets, across two oceans, is the hidden current of the 16th century. It links miners in the Andes with weavers in China, sailors in Manila, with merchants in Seville. It fuels empires, feeds wars, and shapes economies far beyond the sight of those who first struck their hammers in Potosi. By evening, the mule trains rest once more in the shadow of Cerro Rico. Fires flicker in the darkness, their smoke rising slowly. Above, the stars blaze bright, the same stars that shine over Seville, over Manila, over Beijing. The silver continues its journey, silent, tireless, reshaping the world as it moves. Silver, once hidden in the quiet rock of Cerro Rico, did not simply enrich the world. It transformed it. Its flow across oceans carried with it not only wealth, but also imbalance, inflation, and dependence. Empires rose on its promise and faltered under its weight. The consequences of silver were subtle at first, but in time they became as visible as the gleam of the coins themselves. In Spain, where so much of the silver first arrived, the effects were most immediate. Imagine the bustling streets of Seville in the late 16th century. The air is filled with the clink of coins, the sound of carts rolling over cobblestones, the murmur of merchants counting their earnings. Bars of silver lie in warehouses, coins spill across counting tables. Wealth seems abundant, endless, and yet prices begin to rise. Bread that once cost a single coin now costs two. Wool, wine, and oil grow more expensive, the value of silver itself slipping even as more of it pours into the kingdom. The people whisper of the price revolution, though they may not use that name. They feel it in their purses, in the weight of coins that no longer stretch as far. The abundance of silver fuels inflation, its glitter concealing the erosion of value. The crown, flush with treasure, spends recklessly. Picture a royal council in Madrid, its chamber filled with the smell of wax and parchment. Ministers speak of wars in the Netherlands, of fleets to defend against England, of debts owed to bankers in Genoa and Augsburg. The king nods, weary but resolute. Silver flows in from the New World, but it flows out just as quickly, swallowed by the machinery of empire. The fortune of Spain rests not in steady growth, but in a fragile dependence on ships that may or may not survive the Atlantic. Elsewhere, silver brings different consequences. In the markets of Antwerp, Amsterdam, and London, merchants profit from its circulation. Banks grow, credit expands, trade flourishes. Silver becomes the lubricant of commerce, the steady coinage that allows goods to move across continents. In China, silver takes on even greater weight. Taxes are reformed to be paid in silver, and demand grows insatiable. Imagine a peasant farmer in the Yangtze Valley, his fields thick with rice. At harvest, he sets aside grain to eat and sell, but for his taxes, he must obtain silver. He carries rice to market, exchanges it for coins that have traveled from oceans away, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hands. The paradox emerges. Silver enriches, but it also entangles. Nations that lack mines grow dependent on its flow. Spain, rich in silver, becomes poor in productivity, neglecting its industries in favor of imports bought with bullion. China, rich in goods, becomes dependent on the steady arrival of foreign silver, tying its economy to distant empires and uncertain seas. The hidden cost of silver is also in its human toll. In Potosi, miners descend each day into shafts where air grows thin, dust clogs lungs, and mercury from refining poisons silently. Their lives are short, their labor relentless. The coins that glimmer in European purses carry with them the echo of hammers in the dark, the ache of weary shoulders, the breath of men lost in tunnels. At night in Seville, the taverns are full, the air smoky, the laughter loud. Merchants boast of profits, sailors recount voyages, coins clink steadily. But the quiet truth is that silver slips away almost as quickly as it arrives. Inflation rises, debts deepen, wars drain treasuries. The mountain in the Andes continues to give, but the wealth it provides scatters across the world, elusive, fleeting. In the end, silver's mystery lies in its dual nature. It is at once abundance and burden, glitter and shadow. It binds continents together in a single current of exchange. Yet it also reveals the fragility of wealth built on extraction. As night settles over Potosi, the fires of the smelters glow faintly on the mountainside. In Madrid, Seville, and Manila, coins pass quietly from hand to hand. In Beijing, silver rests in strong boxes, its weight measured carefully, its worth beyond gold. Across the world, the consequences unfold silently, like ripples spreading outward from a single drop. Silver reshapes empires, inflates economies, sustains trade, and leaves behind a trail of hidden costs. It is a current too strong to resist, carrying the world into a new age, one where wealth flows endlessly, but never rests. The lagoon is calm in the early morning, its surface a mirror reflecting pale sky and faintly glowing domes. Venice rests upon the water, a city of stone and silence, yet alive with currents of trade and memory. By the late 16th century, its golden age is passing, but its grandeur lingers still, in marble palaces, in quiet canals, in markets where goods of east and west still change hands. The sound of oars drifts across the water. Gondoliers steer their boats along narrow canals, their poles dipping softly into the lagoon. The air smells faintly of salt, seaweed, and wood warmed by the sun. Bridges arch overhead, their stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The houses that line the water rise tall and elegant, their windows framed with Gothic tracery, their walls painted in fading hues of red and ochre. Step into the Piazza San Marco. The square is vast, its stones worn smooth, its arcades echoing with footsteps. Pigeons scatter at the sound of bells from the great campanile, its tone rolling across the city like a slow heartbeat. The basilica gleams with mosaics of gold and deep blue, their surfaces catching the morning light. Inside, the air is cool and heavy with incense, the faint sound of chanting echoing softly against domes. Nearby, the Doge's palace rises in pale marble, its arches delicate, its walls patterned with pink and white stone. Within, chambers smell of wax and parchment, their walls adorned with paintings that tell the city's long story, battles won, treaties signed, triumphs displayed in brushstrokes of color and shadow. Councils meet here still, though their decisions no longer shape the world as once they did. The Rialto Bridge spans the Grand Canal, its arch wide, its stones crowded with merchants and shoppers. Below, the canal bustles with barges carrying goods, barrels of wine, sacks of grain, bundles of cloth. The air is filled with scents, the tang of salt fish, the sweetness of spices, the smoke of kitchens preparing meals of bread, olives, and stews. Voices rise in many tongues: Italian, Greek, Arabic, German. Venice is quieter than in centuries past, yet still a crossroads, its markets alive with the murmur of exchange. Imagine stepping into a warehouse near the canal. The air is cool and dim, filled with the earthy smell of wool, the sweet sharpness of pepper, the faint musk of silks folded in bales. Crates are stacked neatly, their contents marked in chalk. A clerk with ink-stained fingers bends over a ledger, his quill scratching softly. The sound is rhythmic, steady, like the pulse of the city itself. By midday, the lagoon sparkles with light. Ships arrive slowly, their sails furled as they glide into port. Some bring grain from the Po Valley, others wine from Dalmatia, still others goods from more distant markets. Glass beads from Murano traded abroad and returned in bundles of foreign wares. The smell of tar and pitch hangs in the air, mingling with the sweetness of pine from timbers stacked along the quays. Step into a Venetian workshop. In Murano, furnaces roar as glassmakers shape molten material into delicate goblets, beads, and mirrors. The air is hot, shimmering, the smell of smoke thick. The artisans move with slow precision, their breath steady as they blow through long pipes, shaping glass into fragile perfection. In the silk workshops, looms clatter steadily, the rhythm soothing, the air filled with the faint scent of dye. Threads shimmer with colors, crimson, emerald, gold, their sheen soft in the dim light. As evening falls, Venice glows softly. Lamps are lit along the canals, their reflections wavering in the water. Gondolas drift slowly, their lanterns bobbing like stars upon the lagoon. The air grows cooler, carrying the scent of the sea. In the piazza, musicians play lutes and viols, their notes gentle against the hush of night. Couples stroll beneath arcades, their footsteps echoing softly. Venice at twilight feels timeless. Its power has waned, its empire shrunk, yet its beauty endures. The city is no longer the master of Mediterranean trade, but it remains a jewel. Its wealth now quieter, its rhythm slower, its grandeur softened into memory. To walk here is to feel both past and present at once, the echo of centuries of power, and the gentle calm of a city resting in its twilight, surrounded by the eternal embrace of the sea. Onti Bish in Venice, power did not rest in kings or emperors, but in families. Patrician lineages whose fortunes were woven into the fabric of trade. By the late 16th century, their influence had begun to wane, yet their presence still defined the city. Their names echoed in palaces along the Grand Canal, their coats of arms carved in marble, their ledgers filled with centuries of commerce. Imagine entering a Venetian palace belonging to one such family. The facade rises directly from the water, its windows arched, its stones pale against the shifting green of the canal. A gondola ties to the steps, its oar dripping softly as the gondolier steadies it. Inside, the air is cool, shaded from the sun, faintly scented with beeswax, smoke, and the salt of the sea carried in on the breeze. The grand hall is lined with paintings, saints in luminous colors, scenes of Venetian triumphs at sea. A long table rests at the center, its surface polished, its legs carved with lions of St. Mark. At the far end, a clerk bends over a ledger, his quill scratching steadily as he tallies debts, shipments, and investments. The faint sound of ink scratching on parchment fills the stillness, steady as a heartbeat. For generations, families like the Contarini, the Mocenigo, and the Grimani built their wealth on Mediterranean trade. Their galleys once carried spices from Alexandria, silks from Constantinople, and grain from the Black Sea. In return, they sold Venetian glass, wool, and salt across the Mediterranean world. In their palaces, the smell of cinnamon or pepper was not just fragrance, but proof of faraway connections, the scent of wealth brought home. But now, in the late Renaissance, their fortunes face decline. The discovery of sea roads around Africa and across the Atlantic has shifted the balance. Portuguese ships sailed directly to India, bypassing the Mediterranean. Spanish fleets bring silver from the New World, fueling markets in Antwerp and Seville. The patrician families of Venice watch as their dominance slips quietly into memory. Yet they do not vanish. They adapt. Some invest in land on the mainland, where vineyards and farms provide steady, if less glamorous, income. Others turn to banking, lending money to foreign merchants and princes. Their wealth is less flamboyant now, but their influence remains, woven into treaties, marriages, and contracts. Picture a council meeting in the Doge's palace. The chamber is vast, its walls painted with scenes of Venice's glory, ships in battle, allegories of justice and prosperity. Around the long table sit rows of patricians, each dressed in dark robes, their caps plain, their voices low and deliberate. They discuss tariffs, alliances, and disputes among merchant houses. The air is heavy with the smell of wax and ink. Decisions come slowly, each vote cast with calm ritual. Venice's power may be fading, but its families remain careful stewards of what endures. They maintain the arsenal where ships are still built, though fewer now. They support the glassmakers of Murano, whose furnaces burn hot, turning sand into crystal goblets and delicate beads. They patronize painters and musicians, their palaces filled with art and music, even as their trade fleets shrink. In their private lives, the families still live with measured grandeur. Their meals are filled with bread, fish, and wine from the Veneto, but sometimes flavored with saffron or pepper, echoes of older times. They gather in shaded courtyards where fountains trickle softly, the scent of roses and orange blossoms drifting in the air. Their daughters marry into other patrician houses. Their sons inherit ledgers, not swords. By evening, the Grand Canal glows in lamplight. Gondolas pass slowly, their oars dipping rhythmically into the dark water. Behind shuttered windows, candles burn in dining halls, where families speak in hushed tones of debts, inheritances, and the steady effort to preserve what remains. Venice is no longer the master of East-West trade, but its families carry forward a quieter influence. They are no longer the bold pioneers of distant seas, but the careful custodians of a legacy. Their wealth now lies not in fleets that conquer oceans, but in houses that endure, in traditions that hold, in the quiet strength of names remembered across centuries. As night deepens, the city rests. The patrician palaces stand silent along the water, their reflections shimmering in the canal, the families within sleep, their fortunes smaller than before, but their presence still woven into the city. Venice breathes more softly now, its power subdued, yet its legacy endures in the calm, steady rhythm of a city that has learned to live with twilight. By the late 16th century, Venice was no longer the unrivaled master of the seas. The Portuguese and Spanish controlled the oceanic spice routes. The Dutch and English were rising with bold fleets. Yet Venice did not vanish. Instead, it survived by shifting its power inward, from empire to diplomacy, from galleys to glass, from conquest to craft. Its empire of trade gave way to an empire of influence. Picture a Venetian diplomat in the courts of Europe. His robes are plain, his demeanor calm, his words measured. Venice has long trained its ambassadors with care, valuing subtlety over spectacle. In Madrid, Paris, or Constantinople, Venetian envoys listen more than they speak, gathering knowledge, weighing possibilities. Their dispatches return home, carried by couriers, written in coded phrases, their parchment smelling faintly of wax and ink. Within the Doge's palace, the Council of Ten reads these reports by lamplight, their faces thoughtful, their decisions quiet but far-reaching. Venice's survival lies in such diplomacy. Lacking armies as large as Spain's, or fleets as vast as England's, the Republic relies on balance, playing rivals against one another, trading favors, offering neutrality. Its embassies are like invisible webs, delicate yet strong, binding Venice to the great powers without drawing too much attention. Meanwhile, Venice's artisans keep the city's prestige alive. On the island of Murano, the furnaces roar day and night. Imagine stepping into a glassmaker's workshop. The air is hot, shimmering with heat. The smell of smoke clings to stone walls. Artisans move with deliberate rhythm, dip in long pipes into molten glass, their breath steady as they shape glowing orbs into delicate goblets. The glass cools slowly, its surface gleaming faintly in the dim light. These objects, crystal mirrors, beads, chandeliers, are more than commodities. They are ambassadors in their own right, carried across Europe as symbols of refinement. To hold a Venetian goblet is to hold centuries of skill. To taste wine from its rim is to taste not only the drink, but the prestige of a city that has made beauty its currency. Elsewhere in Venice, painters and composers flourish under the patronage of patrician families and religious orders. Imagine walking through a church as the sun filters through stained glass, illuminating canvases by Titian or Veronese. The air is heavy with incense, the sound of a choir rising softly into vaulted domes. Venice invests in art as it once invested in ships, ensuring that its legacy will be remembered not only in ledgers, but in brushstrokes, colors, and melodies. The networks extend beyond Europe as well, even as Venice loses dominance in the spice trade. Its merchants continue to work quietly with Ottoman partners. Picture a small warehouse near the Fondaco dei Turchi, the Ottoman trading house in Venice. The air smells of coffee newly arrived, its dark beans glistening in sacks. Silk is folded in crates, carpets rolled and stacked. Voices in Turkish, Arabic, and Italian mingle softly in the hall. Transactions occur without fanfare, steady, deliberate, keeping alive a commerce that is less about power than persistence. At dusk, the lagoon shimmers. Gondolas drift slowly, their lanterns glowing against the darkening water. In the piazzas, merchants sit at small tables, sipping wine, their conversations quiet. The air smells faintly of salt, jasmine, and wood smoke. Venice seems peaceful, even fragile, yet beneath the calm lies resilience. The mystery of Venice's endurance is not in conquest, but in adaptation. Where others sought expansion, Venice sought balance. Where others flaunted power, Venice refined subtler arts, diplomacy, craft, beauty. Its fleets may no longer rule the Mediterranean, but its glass sparkles in palaces across Europe. Its ambassadors whisper in royal courts. Its paintings glow in chapels and halls. By night, the city rests. The canals reflect the stars. The palaces glow faintly with candlelight. The air carries the sound of soft oars. Venice no longer thunders with the clamor of empire, but it endures in quiet strength. A city that has transformed decline into survival, twilight into grace. The story of money in the late 1500s and beyond is not only a story of glittering riches, it is also a story of rhythm. The slow passage of goods across oceans, the steady scratch of quills across ledgers, the quiet hum of cities rising and falling with trade. We have walked through markets where the air smelled of spice and smoke. We have stepped into counting rooms where coins clinked softly in the hands of merchants. We have watched ships depart into grey seas, their sails heavy with hope, their holds heavy with risk. We have descended into mines where silver was torn from the earth, and we have risen into palaces where diamonds glimmered faintly in lamplight. Everywhere, wealth has been both promise and burden. For some, it meant luxury, fine glass, silks, jewels, and feasts flavored with cinnamon and sugar. For others, it meant endless labor, miners in dark shafts, farmers bent over fields, sailors enduring months upon uncertain seas. The flow of money was never still. It moved constantly, shaping the lives of emperors and commoners alike. Spain, rich in silver, grew restless under the weight of inflation. Venice, fading from power, turned to beauty and diplomacy. The Dutch created corporations that outlasted individuals, their shares binding strangers together across time and distance. England, still uncertain, built its ambition on tobacco and sugar, on joint stock ventures that would one day grow into empire. The Mughal court shimmered with jewels, yet its wealth was measured as much in stable fields and ledgers as in glittering gems. Through it all, one truth remained: Wealth is never still. It flows like water or wind from one place to another, never resting long. The mountain of silver in Potosi became coins in Seville, debts in Genoa, silk in China, porcelain in Manila, spices in Amsterdam. The chain of exchange was vast, invisible, and yet as real as the salt on the air, the ink on parchment, the gleam of coin in lamplight. And yet, in the quiet of history, the clamor softens. The sails that once snapped in the wind now rest in museums. The ledgers, once urgent, now gather dust. The silver coins lie still in glass cases, their edges worn smooth. The palaces remain, their stones weathered, their frescoes faded, but their silence deeper than the noise that once filled them. When we look back, the wealth itself seems less important than the rhythm it carried. The steady footsteps of workers in warehouses, the hum of voices in markets, the soft lap of water against wooden piers, the slow scratch of quills recording debts and profits. The world was bound together not only by ambition, but by repetition, daily tasks that sustained empires even as those empires changed. Now, imagine all of it fading gently into quiet. The fires of the furnaces burn low. The mines of Potosi grow silent. The spice warehouses in Amsterdam close their shutters, their scents lingering in the dark. The gondolas of Venice drift softly through canals, their lanterns glowing faintly against the night. The counting rooms close, their ledgers set aside, their coins resting in stillness. History exhales, the noise becomes memory. The rush of trade softens into the calm of reflection. And you, listening now, are free from the weight of that noise. You carry none of the debts, none of the burdens, none of the restless ambition. You simply observe, gently, from a distance, as the past folds itself away like sails after a long voyage. Breathe slowly, as the merchants once did when their ships returned safely to harbor. Breathe calmly, as the miners once did when they stepped out of the shafts into the cool air of evening. Breathe evenly, as the scribes once did, while their quills moved steadily across parchment. Let the rhythm of their lives become the rhythm of your rest. Slow, steady, unhurried. The world of the 16th century is far away now. Its fortunes have risen and fallen. Its empires have come and gone. What remains is the calm of memory, the gentle awareness that time flows, that wealth flows, that all things flow, and then settle softly into silence. So let the noise of history drift away. Let the coins stop clinking, the sails stop snapping, the ledgers close. Let the spice scents fade, the furnaces cool, the palaces grow quiet, and in their silence, let yourself rest. You are safe, you are still, you are calm. Sleep now, as the world of the past sleeps, deeply, quietly, endlessly.